Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the council meeting for the 25th of June 2012, commencing at 7 o'clock here at the Shaw Auditorium. And we'll start off by asking Ms. Harrison if you could walk us through the late items, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Add item 8C1, delegation, Mr. Charles Thurkle regarding proposed changes to the Fisheries Act of Canada. Add item 8E1, delegation, Mr. Fred Taylor regarding development permit number DP780 at 360-370 Westwood Road. Add item 8E2, delegation, Mr. Charles Thurkle regarding development permit number DP780 at 360-370 Westwood Road. Add item 8H1, delegation, Mr. Sam Yahia regarding liquor license application number LA80 at 63 Victoria Crescent. Add pages to item 8H, liquor license application number LA80 at 63 Victoria Crescent. Delete item 8I, property maintenance at 5107 Broadmoor Place, 614 Kennedy Street, and 571 Albert Street. Add correspondence under 10C, Blue Community Designation, letter from Mr. Jim Getz, President, Canadian Beverage Association.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you, Worship. My mic light wasn't going on there, so what happened. I'd like to add a late delegation request regarding DVP, where am I, at 780 at 360-370 Westwood Road, Mr. Mark Warbrick from Newcastle Engineering.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And we'll ask then for an adoption of the agenda as amended rather. Well, no, we've got Councillor Greaves and Councillor Anderson, where they're going to leap right on this one. Thank you. Move and second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And adoption of the minutes.
Of the minutes.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We'll move into presentations. The first presentation is Superintendent McPhail, our RCMP CO, to give a presentation on the RCMP quarterly update. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Your Worship. Thank you. Good evening to councillors, to staff. Pleased to be here to talk about our quarterly report for the period of January 1st of 2012 to the end of March 31st. As you're aware, Council adopted priorities for the policing operation, which is crime reduction, youth, traffic in the downtown core. And I would like to report on sort of the policing issues that we've undertaken, some of the challenges we've taken over that quarter. Now, it's very important for me to reiterate that we're talking about the time period of January to March 31st of 2012, and we're comparing that to the previous year, exactly that time frame. Now, considerations in that is the time of year. And then I'll speak a little bit about actions we're taking as a result of what occurred over that quarter. Under Council's priority of crime reduction, speaking of crimes against persons, and this is excluding the downtown, the statistics before Council's January to March of 2011, there was 210 offences reported to the policing office, and this period we're down to 203 reports, so a change of about 3%. Now, I'd like to highlight that overall reduction in crimes against persons is due to no arsons and fewer robberies that have occurred over that time frame. Assaults are down to 29% in that category. There are some areas of concern is that we have undertaken a number of sex offense investigations. There's a spike in terms of a raise in that, and that has to do with historical offenses that were reported to our office. But we've also had a raise of about 11% in weapons-related offenses. We're seeing a lot more guns on the streets. We're seeing a lot more issues with knives and other weapons in the context of searches. Not a huge spike, but it is something we're seeing, something we've featured recently in media as well. This stuff we're running into. Moving along into crime reduction is crimes against property. Overall, the reduction is 6%. However, there has been a spike in residential burglaries and over this quarter, and a number of groups of persons that were responsible for those offences. There was a raise in those offences up about 140%. What that means, 140%, means that there were 63 offences reported last year. At that time frame, there was 88 this year. What I can speak to, though, is that our property crime unit was very successful in apprehending individuals involved in that, and they're presently incarcerated. Not all offenses are solved, but we've definitely had an impact in that area. Theft from vehicles are down. Theft over $5,000 is down as well in that area. Any questions on that one? The burglary increases, of course, personally are very concerning for the police, especially in the area of residential. So we are continuing to work on that trend, and it has been lessened. Moving along to prolific offender management. Prolific offender management is basically our prolific offenders, or persons that we watch very closely with other agencies to either have them get out of crime, get themselves some help, or remove themselves from the community. We're managing presently 67 cases for prolific offenders, which is a good thing because we're keeping tabs on people and we're working with people to help them get out of crime. Last year we were handling 51 cases of that nature. Any questions at all on prolific offender management? Council's other priority in crime reduction is violence in relationships. We do have an increase of 46% overall, and the numbers are speaking to 98 this year in that time period compared to 67 last year. We have an enhanced reporting system in the fact that we now have a dedicated domestic violence investigator who's embedded within the policing operation, and we're spending a lot more time with victims of domestic violence with our victim services program and the like, and as a result of that, we're getting more disclosures, and as a result of that, there's more offenses being reported to the police. So it's encouraging to see that people are calling to try to get themselves out of that situation, but it is a concern that people are in jeopardy or in peril in those type of situations. So again, we're working on that. We're improving our means in terms of interacting with that, and we do expect to see an increase in reports, but an increase in reports means that we're dealing with the issue and it's bringing it forward. Are there any questions on domestic violence? Councillor Patchy.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. Violence in relationships, 46% increase. Is that mostly attributed to the fact that you're monitoring it more than you did 12 months ago, or do you have comparisons with other similar jurisdictions? It seems a huge increase.
It's in terms of numbers, comparably, it is significant. It's something we watch. It's the reason why we have a dedicated resource dealing with domestic violence. We're finding that as we have a dedicated resource working with people more closely, working with the families, is that we find out about more situations that may have occurred, which results in an increase in the reports. So as opposed to one time when an issue happens, it may have happened 10 times before. All of that gets reported. All of that gets investigated. All of that gets packaged and brought forward to the Crown or to other agencies to support. Does that assist you, Councillor, in terms of...
Other than maybe comparisons with other jurisdictions?
Yeah, I could do comparisons for you. I do know that domestic violence is a priority throughout the province of BC right now. It is an issue in all communities within British Columbia and within Canada. It's something we're very focused on. It's a very high-risk area for, obviously, the people in those situations and for children and everyone being raised in those type of circumstances. So something we're putting a lot of energy into. And as a result of that, more reporting is resulting.
Thank you.
Superintendent, is the reason for this, or the reasons because of economic issues, or why is it province-wide, or perhaps Western Canada? Why is it going up everywhere, not just here?
Economics is, in some cases, a result of that. It isn't in all cases. It just depends in terms of how people relate to each other, how to respectfully relate to each other, and how those situations get carried away. Addiction, alcohol, all those things play a factor in that. Economic circumstances as well. But it's not just limited to people in...
It's almost like an epidemic, though, if it's spreading throughout other communities as well.
I don't know that it's spreading, Your Worship, in that it's probably been underreported, and because there's a focus on it, there's more reports, and there's more of that's being brought to light to get help for everybody involved.
Good point. Okay. Councillor Johnstone.
Your Worship, I was going to ask the same question because I'm gratified that you have a dedicated member of the force dealing with these domestic issues, but it's, I think, known that in difficult times and hard times, it does result in fights amongst family members. So
a lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure for sure. So That was my question.
Yeah, just to speak a little further to that as well, I was at the BC Association of Chiefs of Police last week in Penticton and did speak with the province in regards to this issue. The province has a number of test sites throughout the province dealing with integrated domestic violence units, which bring all the agencies together. We have that now in Nanaimo, but not formalized with the provincial agencies. So I have an agreement with the province to host Nanaimo as one of the test pilots for this to increase our capacity in terms of dealing with that issue. Because as you can appreciate, domestic violence affects the people involved in the relationship, but all the other persons that are related to the people in confrontation as well.
Sure.
We have one more question for you, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you. Your victim services agency that you work very closely with, I assume, is a real asset to the program that we're dealing with when we talk about violence in relationships?
Absolutely essential. Very good point. Victim services is embedded within our office. Cheryl Zaptichny is the coordinator. We have support staff that work within there. It's absolutely essential that when someone's in crisis, that there's supports put in place, not only for the emotional side of things, but there's the housing, there's all those considerations that come into play. When people are in a close, tight relationship, and then there's supports that are required, we have to have victim services, we have to have housing, we have to have social services assistance for people in those type of turmoil. We have to have protective housing, places for people to go. We have all of that in Nanaimo, but we're hoping to increase that, as we've done with the housing strategy, to expand that in terms of the integrated units that exist in Victoria presently and in Prince George. I would like to see Nanaimo doing that as well. And our statistics help us get there. So,
thank you. Compliments to those members that work in that area and those people that they work with.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can you tell us about the 211 program?
211?
Yes.
I don't know about the 211 program.
Well, today was the first I heard of it as well.
Yeah, so it will be something I'll be researching. Mike, make some notes for me.
Thank you.
Is there anything you could tell me or enlighten me a little bit?
Well, it's my understanding that the province has initiated it, and it's a contact number where they have 35 employees working around the clock to deal with things like domestic violence, access to counseling, access to shelter, access to all kinds of services. And I'd never heard of it until just today. So
that contact that I have with the province for domestic violence investigations, I'll follow up on the 211 with that and get an answer back through staff.
It'd be nice to know how we would dovetail with that.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no further questions. Go ahead if you have...
Now, crime reduction as well as drug enforcement and our initiatives there. Now, drug enforcement is up 26%. 26% in that we did 134 last year, 169 this year. Drug enforcement is basically dictated by police investigations that are undertaken. Drug enforcement is something where we take action. So we have to receive information to be able to take action. So we're taking more action, so we have higher reported statistics in terms of drug enforcement. Focus being primarily on methamphetamine, cocaine, and heroin addiction, and the results of that. So trying to deal with that, not only for the drugs, but for the property crimes that are related, all the other crimes that are related. So we're putting a lot of emphasis on drug enforcement, as this council has endorsed and requested of us. But drugs and alcohol, especially drugs, are the root of a lot of the crime issues, and as a result of that, we have to be dealing with that end of things and getting people who are trafficking drugs into custody and appropriately dealt with. Any questions on drugs? Now, I have a slide on marijuana grow operations, and you'll see that it's down 68%. Now, what that means is that our initial detachment efforts are almost underreported. We're involved with a crime initiative presently. So Nanaimo is a partner on a regional team that deals with marijuana grow operations. Now, marijuana grow operations in the eyes of the police are a cash commodity for organized crime in a lot of ways. Now, there's other legal grow operations that exist, but in terms of policing efforts, we need to be on this issue. A lot of the grow operations are in our rural areas now. They're not within the town itself. So we have a resource that's seconded to the crime initiative. The crime initiative is basically the capital region, they call it, integrated marijuana enforcement team. So we have a resource in there. I don't have their statistics, but their statistics would easily bridge for between the 28 of last year and the 8 of this year. Our focus has been primarily on the hard street drugs, and we have a resource that's out dealing with things in the rural area. The other issue we're running into is that a lot of the grow operations have marijuana medical licenses attached to them. So as a result of that, enforcement action isn't appropriate when there's a medical license. But there is an ongoing issue or a challenge for us in policing in that the medical licenses also have issues attached to them that are criminal in nature. So there's a bit of a gray area there. And the Crime Initiative is looking into that as well and bringing legislation forward or bringing proposed legislation forward to the government to talk about how these operations are managed or how these licenses are. We get it and we understand that there's a medicinal side to this, but it's sort of getting blurred in terms of the enforcement side and policing. So we've chosen in the Nanaimo detachment to work on the hard street drugs, but we have a resource that's working on the marijuana grow initiative in terms of the marijuana money being used for organized crime, that type of thing. Any questions on that one at all?
I don't see any.
Now, I'm very pleased to say that crimes by our young offenders are down overall 34%. It's not a huge number, 50 to 33, but it's very significant. We put a lot of focus into youth in our detachment and within our community, and I think that's a very important thing. The more time we spend policing in school liaison, the more time we spend going to youth community meetings, the more time we spend working on organizing teams or coaching within teams or spending time with youth, it assists us. If youth are in a situation where they may be brought into a situation that would cause crime to occur, it's not a good place for them to be. If we can deal with it at the beginning, that's where we're putting our focus right now. I think it's very important that we work on the youth aspect of things. I'm working presently right now to see that we enhance our school liaison unit by an additional two resources for this fall. We're working with the provincial side of the business line to see that occurs. Councillor Patchy, Your Worship.
Not so much a question as a comment. Councillor Johnstone and I attended the Kids for Kids participation program at, it was Georgia Avenue School.
Georgia Avenue School.
And, you know, I want to tell you how impressed I am by Constable Cheryl Armstrong, who is the liaison there. She just does absolutely fabulous work, and it was nice to see you there as well. So hopefully that will pay off in the future, because those kids certainly knew what it was all about. Thank you for doing that.
We'll show that as Sergeant Cheryl Armstrong, right?
Yeah, thank you for that comment, and it's time well spent.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Bishop. Increase by 2 from how many?
From 4
From 4
to 6.
Thank you.
We're having, we want to see that Cedar and other schools are covered as well. We want to see that it's more comprehensive, that we're involved with the youth outside of school that may need our assistance as well, or at least guidance, other things we can do to assist.
Okay, I see no further questions.
Now, traffic, again, non-fatal crashes are down 13, so from 63 in the quarter last year to 55. There's been a fair amount of enforcement action. There's been a lot of education in terms of the immediate roadside prohibitions. I think people are starting to get it, so the crashes are down. That's a very good thing. Moving on to our fatal crashes.
Sorry, Chairman, just a couple of quick questions. One, I wondered about fatalities involving motorcycles. At one point, about a year and a half ago, there was a bit of a crackdown on motorcycles because of the number of incidents involving death from motorcyclists. And I just wondered, has that stat improved as well?
The motorcycle stats for our town haven't changed. I mean, our fatal statistics are exactly where they were last year. I couldn't quote you exactly, but I know that a lot of time has been spent on enforcement, a lot of time has been spent on education. Some changes have been made in legislation in terms of qualification for driving motorcycles and that type of thing. It seems to have improved the situation. It's not as dire as it was, but I don't have the exact number for you, Your Worship, but I can get that for you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Councillor Johnstone.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The 911 program, the call-in,
Yes.
is that still going?
It's working very well for us.
Working very well. Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. So
And the best part about it is there's not a lot of calls coming in. So that means there's not a lot of, not that people, there's not an apathy, it's just that the number of impaired drivers on the road is down, and I'll speak to that as well.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you. Councillor Johnstone and I last Saturday were at an event at Northern Nanaimo Mall that dealt with seniors on mobility devices, scooters. There seemed to be an inordinate amount of problems, and there was a fatality not so long ago. Do we need to change bylaws to deal with those types of devices?
Presently, no, but I'm familiar with the situation in Victoria. Chief Graham featured it at our Traffic Services Management Committee, where last year there was an elderly person using one of those devices that got themselves hurt. There are issues that we have within the area, but not to the point where we really need to look at bylaws, but with something we're monitoring because it can be a problem for us. Scooters is another issue, and they're unlicensed vehicles as well. So the competency to use them is in question. So Corporal Norm Smith is managing our traffic unit. He's monitoring that aspect. He meets monthly as well with the island traffic managers, and he also meets with the district traffic officer. So that any issues that come with that, any bylaws that would be developing, we'd be looking at that as well. So we're watching Victoria if that sort of answers or helps you.
Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Richard. Is it reasonable that on the previous slide about non-fatal injury crashes, is it reasonable to assume that the majority of those or the higher percentage are at intersections?
I didn't get your question clearly.
So of the non-fatal injury crashes, is it reasonable to assume that the majority of those or the highest percentage of those are taking place at controlled intersections?
I don't have that statistic, but I can find out for you. Intersections are usually areas where you have crashes, in that people don't necessarily follow the right rules and regulations in terms of stopping or appropriately stopping or red lights. But I don't have that statistic to give you, but I can definitely get that statistic for you, Councillor.
Thank you. Through your worship, just one more. The reason that I specifically asked that question is because I think that we have on our system, I think we have a lot of intersections, and we continue to add controlled intersections with lights and things, and I'm just from our transportation plan, not always a big fan of more intersections.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. Mike, if you can just make a note for us too so we can get back to Councillor Bestwick through staff.
That's all the questions for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Worship. Just going to speak on 24-hour suspensions. 24-hour suspensions are down. That would be in terms of, I think, a lot to do with a lot of the education that had to do with impaired driving, the immediate roadside prohibition provisions, the stuff that came in, and it's down. As the fatal crashes are, we haven't changed in terms of numbers, and the injury crashes are down. It was a significant, when the immediate roadside prohibition came in, there was a 40% reduction overall in the first 6 months of that program. So I'm seeing a lot of that. Also, the IRP, there's been legislative change, which I'll speak to as well, that brought back in the provisions as of June 15th, the provisions for giving the police officers alternatives as to whether running it through the criminal courts or going to the administrative prohibitions through the superintendent of motor vehicles.
Sorry for all the questions, but what are the stats here? Are they all alcohol related or are they drug related as well?
They're both. They're a combination of both. It's a very good question, though, because something that we're seeing is, as a result of the immediate roadside prohibitions, is that we're seeing a lot of drug-detected situations where we bring in an analyst to look at persons at roadside, so the effects of, say, marijuana consumption while driving or other drugs. And we're seeing an increase in that. The coroner's office is reporting higher statistics in terms of drug involved in fatals as well, as opposed to just primarily alcohol or combinations thereof. So something that we had again last week at the BC Association of Chiefs of Police was basically a recommendation from us as a body as to other provisions for the police to use to detect marijuana consumption or other drug consumption, as opposed to just bringing a roadside expert, some kind of roadside screening devices that we could use to again make the roads safer.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And lastly, impaired driving. And I'm pleased to see impaired driving is down 54%. I'd like to say it's all because of the immediate roadside prohibitions, but I also like to say that we did have a point in time where we had to adjust the legislation so that there was, in the eyes of the court, more appropriate provisions in place for persons to appeal, basically, the roadside prohibition. So as a result of that, the numbers of immediate roadside prohibitions have gone down. I think the numbers have gone down with impaired driving anyways because of all the public interest and all the public, pro or con, have brought that issue to the attention of a lot of people. So it's brought it back. Now, we'll be able to monitor that over the period from June onwards because we have the legislation back. So the police officer basically has the decision-making ability to either go the administrative prohibitions if it's a routine matter, or if it's a repeat offense or that type of thing, or a crash or something where people may be injured, the criminal side of the house. The roadside prohibition on the administrative side is a much more expeditious process. It doesn't take as much time, so you can be out on the road more. However, there are parameters that we carefully balance that if it is criminal in nature, that the criminal statutes are followed. So the next period of time will be very interesting to see how it plays out in terms of the numbers. But I do believe that there's been quite the public education in terms of impaired driving and the importance of not driving after you've been drinking. Questions?
Not at this point, I don't think. No.
Seatbelt violations, something we watch. If you're in a crash, you've got a seatbelt on, your chances of surviving are better. We're up in terms of 9% on enforcement of seatbelts. There's been a lot of creative, how would I call it, creative road work done by Norm Smith. I think Easter Bunny suits and things like that on the road, spotting scopes at the school zones, looking to see if people are wearing their seatbelts, kind of good stuff. So I can see why the stats are up 9%. Very important that people are wearing seatbelts. I mean, if there is a crash, your chances of surviving a crash are much, much better. So I want to see that people are belted, especially kids in cars. And then we're down in terms of distracted drivers. Distracted drivers is using a mobile device while you're driving. We're down in the enforcement of that. And the issue for us is in policing is that we almost have to be covert to be able to appropriately deal with that. Spotting scope, a little tough on a spotting scope in a school zone. If somebody's talking on a phone, it gets chucked on the floor pretty easy. But in terms of working on that, I know there's a lot of cell phones out there. When I drive to and from places, I see people on cell phones. So we have to get a little more creative in how we're dealing with that, because they do relate to crashes. When people are distracted, things happen. And despite the advertisements, I think very effective advertisements that have been done on distracted driving, we don't seem to be changing that behavior. So presently, right now, it is focused, and you probably will hear an improved number over our next quarter, which is the quarter following this. So I'll be back to you in September talking about that. Any questions on distracted driving?
Can you get cell blockers at an intersection?
Cell blockers at intersection?
Cell blocker at an intersection, or would that interfere with business too much?
Well, it may. If a person's got a hands-free, it's appropriate. If a person's got to make a 911 call, hopefully it overrides it. Like all of those considerations. A cell phone is a very valuable tool, and for policing, for others, it may need an emergency contact. But in terms of driving while you're doing that, take the time, light up the hands-free, use the electronic, if you have to talk, that kind of thing. Even that, some people get in, even with a hands-free. They'll drive past where they were going to turn off or whatever conversation they're in. So lots to be thinking about with that. So again, good question, though. Any other questions?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Now, downtown safety. Downtown is an incredible place to be. I enjoy going downtown. We're proud to say that crimes against the persons are down 18%. 17 reports last year, 14 this year. Again, I talked a little bit about weapons offenses. Weapons offenses are up slightly, but that means somebody's carrying a knife or that kind of thing. It may be a situation after bar close, that type of thing, but not significant. Again, there were spikes, not a big change, but downtown overall, crimes against persons is down. As I said, assaults are down 29%. That has to do with bar watch. That has to do with the police officers being out on the street. And speaking of bar watch and police officers out on the street, is the emphasis right now in the present time is more officers on the street, walking around on the beat, checking, doing like bike patrol, not necessarily on bikes, but getting out of the cars, walking and talking to people, working with the security people, much like we do downtown all the time with the downtown downtown community office, with the security people, with the bylaws officers, but doing that in Terminal, doing that at Brooks Landing, doing that at Country Club, doing that up at Rutherford, all around, Rutherford, Woodgrove, all around. So be out there looking, make sure your policemen are out there walking around, because the boss expects that they should be, and I want to see that occur. So just wanted to sort of relay that one.
Well, that's important, I think, and we appreciate that.
Well, we need to see that.
Yeah.
Now, property crimes are up 43%, and that is related mainly to shoplifting, believe it or not. That's driven the statistics up significantly. I believe economy is part of that. I know that there's been a lot of enforcement action taken in regards to that in the present time, and that has seemed to move the situation up towards Terminal, up towards Brooks Landing. So that's the points we're focusing on right now. Shoplifting is something that, again, you have to be out there looking for it to be able to account for the numbers. So if shops have hired security or they've called the police, we've been dealing with a lot of cases through our restorative justice, and it's working for us. But we also are in a point in time now where a lot of transient people are coming over. It's summertime, so there's people looking for opportunities to travel elsewhere. So they're looking for quick means to make money. So it's something that we're right on top of and working on in the present time. But again, just sort of give you an explanation, we've actually got our vehicle thefts in the downtown down 83%, but our shoplifting stats are up around 200. So shoplifting went from 17 in the period last year to 44 in the present time. So that's a lot. So we're working with the businesses. We're talking about problem offenders. As you've seen, our prolific offender management list has gone up. We've got more people on the lists. And of course, as we know about people, we bring them into that forum as well. Any questions at all about property crime in the downtown? Now, something I'm very pleased with is the nuisance property management. Nuisance property, how we manage nuisance property, how we classify properties that cause problems for the police and for fire and for others is a very good process. We've got one additional nuisance property which bring the statistics up to 17%, but it's looked at by other communities when I share that at BC Chiefs and other places as a very effective way to deal with problem properties. If we're on top of properties, we seem to be doing better. So we have a very good working relationship with the city in terms of bylaws office and the RCMP, in terms of our combined efforts on dealing with that. Dave LeBurge and his bike crew, our watch commanders, Randy Churchill, all should be complimented on that nuisance property effort. It just seems to bring everything together and gel it, much like we're trying to do with housing strategy and other things. Again, we talk about integrated domestic violence. I think the more we work together, the better that we're going to have outcomes in terms of that area.
Good point, yeah.
Any questions at all on that?
Oh, we do have one. Councillor Patchy.
Could you bring us up to speed on the situation at the Newport Hotel, which was declared a nuisance property, and just by going in the newspapers, I don't see it having changed a heck of a lot.
Not a lot. These things take a bit of time. There is action in the wings, but to discuss that at any length at this present time, I wouldn't be able to give you details, but I can obtain details for you as to how that's progressing.
That's okay. Thanks.
If it progresses further, I'm sure this council will be aware of that fairly shortly, because this is the body that we'll be coming to. In nuisance property designations, there's 4 designated properties presently at the previous time, and there was 4 during this quarter as well, so the same. Now, that's overall the crime statistics. There's a number of areas and categories, and I've tried to capture that in a sort of short, precise, Mike Dietrich and I, in a short, precise presentation to this council. But are there any questions that this council has of me while I'm here right now?
Well, one, Councillor Johnson has a question, but one thing I want to bring up is now you have a marine capability with an inflatable that is available, and hopefully that will be involved in boat watch and some of those marine installations and so on, plus emergencies. So
thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate the question, because one of the things I have crib notes for was to talk about the marine unit. The marine unit wasn't in play during the quarters because we run it for the spring, summertime into the fall, and we use it to complement events, and it is in play now. So we're having a lot of Shipping Act checks. We're having a lot of property checks. We've had some success with theft from boats. We've had a lot of presence as well in terms of even our law enforcement torch run. We had the boat out at the corner. We have them out patrolling. We have them on the lakes dealing with impaired boating. So they're out there. But in terms of this quarter, they're not active. They're active in the summertime. And that's when the seasonal policing money comes into us from the province as well. So it helps us to fund that initiative. The city's a partner in that, but the province is carrying that vessel on the lake on behalf of us at Nanaimo Detachment.
Thank you. We have a question. Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Superintendent McPhail. I may have missed it, but one of your presentations in the past, we talked about stats by neighborhoods. And I'm just wondering, are we going to be producing those stats in the local media so people are aware of the level of crime in their neighborhoods? For example, car thefts or B&Es?
It's a very good question. We're looking right now at bringing a crime reporting platform from Prince Albert that brings the crime data into our detachment. We have within our detachment what we call an intelligence hub, and it brings all the information together and it works as a platform for us to basically prioritize the work we're undertaking. So it's in that we're developing. I think what you're looking for.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it would help have neighborhoods having more eyes on the streets if there's a known increase in car theft or break-in entries in a specific neighborhood.
Yeah, to sort of speak to that further, is what we've done is when there's a spike of crime in an area, Gary O'Brien will organize a community meeting. He has block watch captains, and the block watch captains receive reports through Gary of where the crime spikes occur. That block watch captain can then share that with a list of people within the community to discuss it. But yes, a means for us to give the crime statistics in an area where people can access it is something we're trying to overcome at the present time. How do we get the timely information under a ComStat type model out there so people can see where the crime trends are and assist us in terms of who's doing what, as opposed to just neighborhood canvas, can you go look at it? So it's a platform we're working on. So what I was alluding to is this crime mapping that'll come out of this platform will allow us to do that, have that information at a glance, and be able to put that up under GIS mapping data and all that type of thing. Great question, so thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Superintendent McPhail, for doing your presentation. I just had one single question, and that was in regards to the overall crime rate in Nanaimo. Would you say that that has increased or decreased?
It's decreasing. Continues to decrease around the 30% mark. What we're working on as well as a policing operation is reducing the crime severity index. That has to do with serious crimes all the way down. The crime severity index by 5% a year for the next 3 years to bring it down a further 15%. Now, crime severity would be homicides, robberies, burglaries, and they're all rank scored, as well as property crimes. We're looking at reducing property crimes by 5% per year for 3 years as a target. So it's a good question.
So I do have a follow-up to that then. So if crime is decreasing then, do you think that this council still needs to add additional police officers?
I think it's absolutely essential that we have increased resources for our youth programs, to basically the complexity of investigations and dealing with community in a manner that I'm describing takes a lot of time. The police have to be out on the street speaking to people and talking to them. Something that you will see, and I've been sort of reporting on that as I've gone through, the more we're in the community, the more we know about what's occurring in the community. We put special focus on domestic violence, and the numbers of reports are up. When you put special focus on things and you start putting in time, it requires us to be out there. So there's what's reported in terms of statistics and what actually exists. And there's a lot more that actually exists out there than is ever reported. So the more that we're involved, the more entrenched that we are, and the more that we're networking with other agencies like hospital and housing and social services, we're going to be able to do that. Yes, there's efficiencies in that, but it takes people. It takes police to be out there. People need to see the police to feel safe in a lot of ways, and we're a very safe community, but being out there talking to them about more than just the crime issues. What is the fabric of the community? How is it brought together? How do we work with everyone? Time with youth, increasing the numbers there. We need to spend the time there. There's challenges there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further questions at this time. That's the presentation, is it?
That is.
Well, thank you very much, Superintendent McPhail. Very enlightening, and I just want to say that we are very, very pleased with the relationship we have with the RCMP, certainly under your command and the local branch here. It's been excellent, and I want to compliment you on the job that you and your men are doing, and women as well, obviously. So thank you again.
Thank you for the support of council, and thanks for all the hard work of city staff as well.
We'll move into community safety and development. 8A, Development Process Review Committee Residential Construction Guide, and the presentation will be by Mr. Lindsay, and Manager of Building Inspection to give a PowerPoint presentation on the Residential Construction Guide. Mr. Lindsay, you're on.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council. It's certainly my privilege to be here this evening to present to you the recently completed residential construction guide. I should note that this guide's the direct result of the work that's being done by your Development Process Review Committee. Very early on in their mandate, DPRC looked at the single-family home permitting process, made some suggestions through that review, and one of them was the creation of a comprehensive brochure or handout for people, maybe first-time home builders that are looking at what's the process in the city of Nanaimo. So staff certainly ran with that suggestion. We worked with the Central Vancouver Island chapter of the Canadian Home Builders Association, Byron Gallant, the president, and they assisted us with the preparation of what we're calling Welcome Home, a Citizen's Guide to the Construction of 1 and 2 unit dwellings in the city of Nanaimo. Certainly, I'll walk through it tonight, and I'm not going to go through every page of the document, but just the idea is to give you a flavor of what this guidebook looks like. I call it a guidebook because it ended up being much more than a brochure. We set out from the start trying to create a comprehensive document that touched on the 4 major components of home construction. So the guidebook itself is about 25 pages in length. I'll walk through the 4 major sections and just give you a brief outline of what someone will find in here. It's also important to keep in mind that we call it the guidebook, and I'm presenting here a hard copy of it this evening. If we were doing this 10 years ago, we would produce this document, and the vast majority of people would come to our front counter, and we'd provide them a hard copy. Today, the reality is people contact us online. They want to have this stuff online. So that was certainly front of mind as we went through and developed this guide. If you notice as you go through it, there's numerous links. So if you're reading a section about the zoning bylaw, you can click on that link and get the zoning map or the zoning for your property. So there's links throughout there. It'll certainly be in very short order be available on our website and be available for people to interact with there. As I mentioned, the guide is broken down into 4 major sections, sort of following the components of home construction. So there's sort of the pre-planning, the design, the permitting, and finally the construction. This is a sample of what you'll find in the first page on pre-planning. We've called it Getting to Know Your Lot, but the idea is to give people the general background, the understanding of the rules and regulations around home construction, so that when they're looking at their vacant piece of land, it helps them with the planning phase. So in this section, there's information about the zoning bylaw, talks about what zoning is, how it applies, what are setbacks, what's height restrictions, things you need to be concerned before you get into the design phase. What are easements and rights of ways? How do you find out if you have them on your property? Where do you get copies of them, and what does it mean? It also includes information on city services. So what services are available to my lot? How deep are they? Not many people think about this, but it's an important factor because, first of all, you want to make sure the property you're looking at is serviced, but also the depth of the servicing can indicate whether or not your house can contain a service basement or not. There's also information here about access and focus on topography and natural features. So if your lot contains or is in close proximity to a creek or environmentally sensitive area, those are the kind of issues you need to be aware of before you start into the design phase. The second part of the document, what we call designing your home, speaks a lot to how you go about selecting a design. We have a huge component in here about think green and trying to encourage people to think about incorporating energy efficiency into their new home. We can include information on how to contact an energy advisor and what that person can do for you as you work through your home design. There's also information in this section about secondary suites. As you know, secondary suites are allowed on all lots within the city of Nanaimo, and it's something to consider in the design stage of your home. There's also information here about variances. So you get through the home design process and you find there's some component of your home that may not be able to comply with all the regulations. It talks about avenues such as a board of variance or development variance permits. Section 3 talks primarily about obtaining your permits, which the building permit is one permit, so it talks about the requirements of your building permit, the processing times, but it also talks about other permits. So it talks about the electrical permits, gas permits, and if required, tree removal permits. There's also information here about how you contact the Homeowner Protection Office and requirements related, out of the Home Protection Office for your application. Final section of the guide walks you through the construction process, things to consider when you start new construction on site, including erosion, sediment control. But it does sort of this visual walkthrough of the major steps and components to our building inspection process, and gives people an idea that maybe aren't familiar with home building of when we'll attend the site and what information we'll be looking for. The document concludes with a number of links and contact information for both internal and external agencies, so that the reader can certainly, there's a wide variety of information out there, so the reader can continue the research and what we're calling a residential worksheet. So hopefully that they can take the information that they've learned through this document, some of the important questions that they need to answer for themselves before they start down this road, and it gives them some place to record that. Your Worship, we're certainly pleased with where we got to. The Development Process Review Committee, as I mentioned, is instrumental in the creation of this document. They've reviewed the final document, provided some recommendations. Those have now been incorporated, and we're prepared to go public with the document. We believe that it does serve a framework for us. We're looking at using it for a number of other topics, so that I think we'll have other guidebooks, may not be of this length, but certainly covering the other topics that we see in the building department and possibly other sections. And finally, through the building inspection, we're going through a process right now of updating our website. So not only will this information be on there, but the end result, we hope to have all of our information a little more easily accessible to the general public. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Lindsay. It looks like a very, it's a great document and very readable, which I think is nice, very well laid out. So I don't know whether it's you or the Development Process Review Committee that should take credit for it. But no, it's very good. So, Councillor Bestwick, you have a question?
I don't have a question, Your Worship, but I'll just wait if anybody does have a question before I proceed.
Sure.
No questions? Terrific.
Anything else? No, thank you very much, Ms. Lindsay. That's great.
Your Worship, if I may, just as prior to the committee recommendation, I would just like to compliment my colleagues, Councillor McKay and Councillor Kipp, who sit on the Development Process Review Committee, and of course the members of the committee at large from the construction industry who have worked tirelessly, meeting twice a month. This DPRC has been in inception for approximately 6 months. During that time, I believe that we've accomplished a great deal, and had it not been for the commitment of staff to support us in our efforts and the commitment that staff have made, this is just the first step in many DPRC recommendations that I believe that will come forward. And if the staff has set the bar extremely high with this 4-step manual and guide and this resource guide for residential 1 and 2 unit opportunities, be it a novice or experienced builder. And there's absolutely no question that when we move forward in this area and others, that, as I mentioned, staff have set the bar real high. This is an outstanding document. It is a living document. It will change. It will be a work in progress. And I'm certain that hopefully we'll be able to take this to other areas beyond just residential. So highest of kudos and compliments to our senior staff and all other members of staff, Ted Swaby and Dale Lindsay and Andrew Tucker and Dean Musso and anybody else that I've missed. I apologize. And it's been a terrific group to work with thus far, and I'm sure only going to get better after this has been produced and put on the street. So thank you to everybody. So the committee recommendation, Your Worship, is that Council receive the report regarding the residential construction guide.
Sorry, the second motion? I lost my screen here. Okay, any discussion? If not, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. That the committee recommendation that Council one endorse a baseline starting point in all community contribution discussions of A, $1,000 per door for multifamily development, and B, 34, I assume that means dollars per square meter for commercial industrial development, and 2, further refinements of the development amenity policy established by the official community plan. What's that? I hear you mumbling something over there, okay. The future community plan, section 7.3, as part of any future neighborhood plans. And this is to deal with the amenity contributions?
Your Worship, I would so recommend that Council endorse items 1A, B, and 2.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on this? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And now that we're into item C, then, Advisory Committee on Environmental Sustainability, proposed changes to the Fisheries Act of Canada and the impact on the watercourse protection for the City of Nanaimo. And our first, we have a delegation, Mr. Charles Thurkle. And Mr. Thurkle, if you're present. Welcome, sir. You have up to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Charles Thurkle, 611 Shaughnessy Place, Nanaimo. And I just want to make a comment on this item on the agenda, changes to the Fisheries Act as proposed by the federal government in Ottawa. As some of you probably already know, I've spent about 10 years on the Environment Committee myself, and I have seen a lot of changes in that time, most of them very, very positive. In fact, all of them have been positive. Our original stream bylaws in Nanaimo, if I'm not mistaken, date back to the 1980s. And originally there were 14 fish-bearing streams that were recognized in the city. And they were protected by virtue of being drainage systems. And the bylaws were focused on preventing barriers, flooding and so on, and blockages in the creeks. And actually that stood very well in terms of stream protection too, as well as property protection. In 1996, I was on the Environment Committee, and I remember the first environmental planner, Harriet Rugeberg, spent many hundreds of hours, along with different staff members, crafting those 1996 bylaws that first gave us a riparian setback of 30 meters on the Millstone and the Chase River, and 15 meters on other streams, and a minimum of 7.5 on even the smallest stream in the city, regardless of whether or not it had fish. I don't want to take up 10 minutes of your time because it only needs a couple of minutes to say that regardless of what happens in Ottawa and who's in power and what shade of government we've got, they can't alter the laws of physics. They can't repeal the law of gravity. They can't change the laws of hydrology. And they can't change the need for stream protection. And when I say stream protection, forget that term stream protection. What you're really talking about is property protection. Because if you protect a stream, it's all well and good. Wonderful to have fish and wildlife and a place where kids can grow and play in the creek. But what you're really talking about is property protection, and you know it and I know it. If you want to know the impact of streams on properties and on roads and infrastructure, just watch the TV tonight, and the key word to remember is sycamores. You could say 5 years ago it might have been the Saguenay River in Quebec with torrential floods. All around the world, torrential floods seem to be impacting on almost every continent, from Australia, Europe, North America, you name it. Our climate may be changing, and our stream protection bylaws are going to become more and more important with time, if any of the predictions about climate change are true. The city is spending millions of dollars right now upgrading Quarterway Road Bridge, and it's partly to improve the traffic flows, which is very important, but mainly it's to take the bridge structure to a 1 in 200 year flood control status and to upgrade it so that it can handle a 1 in 200 year flood. Again, if some predictions are true, that 1 in 200 year flood event could happen every 20 years, or even more frequently than that. We don't know, but anyone in town will tell you that our weather is unusual this year, and it's been unusual like this. We've had juniors, I think, for the last 3 years in Nanaimo, and I think our weather patterns seem to be changing, but who knows? There's a huge support for fish protection and stream protection in Nanaimo that doesn't stem from Ottawa. It doesn't come from the federal government. We have provincial riparian area regulations which are very detailed and so intricate that, to be honest, I don't really understand all the implications. They're pretty complicated. But I do know this, that the people of Nanaimo, our own bylaws, and the people of Nanaimo are very, very keen to see our streams protected. I can give you a couple of measures of this, if you don't mind. On Saturday, along with some of the members of council and some members of staff too, I was at the South End Community Association Miners Picnic. It was an incredible event. It's been held for at least 100 years, and it was restored or revivified 20 years ago by Charles Torreon, a real pillar of society. And I want to pay a tribute, if I could, to Charles, Mr. Torreon tonight, because he has been an absolute pillar of this community. And I'd say that if city staff or members of council want to know what the definition of a sound and healthy community association is, I think you know if you were there on Saturday that the South End Community Association is alive and well, and I think in large part it's due to people like him. Now, I was there because I represented the Harbour City River Stewards, and at the total event there were hundreds, I don't know how many hundreds, 600-800 people, and we talked to a couple of hundred of them at our little display, showing them the side channel and the Millstone River. There's a tremendous level of interest, particularly from kids and so on. We know that, and I realize I'm going over old ground here. Just yesterday, I had the pleasure of finishing a 6-month project in Barsby Park. In February, I was asked if we could possibly pull ivy out of that park. And with the help of the students from Dover Bay Eco Club, we pulled 40 cubic meters of ivy out of that park. And if you want to walk through and see the difference, you'll see native plants growing. And the reason these two seemingly unrelated topics are brought up is because there is a tremendous support for stream protection in the city. Not only, for the fish and wildlife, as I said, but because most people realize that you're really protecting property, you're protecting people, and you don't need to watch the news too many times to know that messing with these streams, building too close to them, is a pretty dangerous thing to do. Anyway, I strongly endorse the suggestions of the Environment Committee, because I would. But I think we need to sort of hold the fort here in Nanaimo, regardless of what might happen across the country. Because, again, as I say, we can't repeal the laws of gravity, and the laws of hydrology are just the same as they were this time last year. And, heaven forbid that we have anything happen in Nanaimo that we come to regret in the future. So thanks very much. And
thank you, sir. I see no questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, cheers.
Okay, moving along on to the top of page 3, report to council to be introduced by ACE's chair, Councillor Brennan.
Your Worship. Would you like me to read all of the whereases, or do you want me to go straight to the resolution? all the whereases.
Well, maybe, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say, maybe for the benefit of those that are at home that aren't here with us, it might be a great opportunity. I know you're really looking forward to it. So.
I don't mind. I don't want to bore anybody, that's all.
No, that's fine.
Okay, so the committee recommends that council adopt the following resolution and forward copies to the federal and provincial Minister of Fisheries, to Nanaimo MPs and MLAs, and to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities for consideration at the 2012 annual convention. Whereas the protection of environmentally sensitive areas, including watercourse riparian areas, is an important value for the people of our community and is recognized in our official community plan. And whereas Nanaimo has made significant investments in the protection of fresh and marine habitat within our city, and whereas Bill C-38 has made significant changes to the Fisheries Act that will limit the Act's application to some types and sizes of projects and increase discretionary powers of the minister, all of which could reduce the Act's ability to protect the environment. Now, therefore, be it resolved that UBCM call upon the Government of Canada to develop revised Fisheries Act policies and regulations in collaboration with all stakeholders, specifically including local governments through UBCM and FCM, to ensure changes address municipal concerns while strengthening environmental protection for our water courses. And the second one I will do separately.
Second motion.
Okay, you're moving the first item and moved and seconded. I see no discussion. All those
Just
in
make
favor?
the comment that the committee was fortunate in having Charles Thurkel as the chair last term, and before his term ended, he alerted us to this issue, and so we followed up, and this motion comes before you because of his initiative.
Okay, thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And carry on with 2, please.
That council directs staff to review the City of Nanaimo's relevant watercourse policies in light of the changes in the Fisheries Act of Canada to confirm whether the city needs to make any adjustments in order to maintain current standards for watercourse protection in Nanaimo.
And you so move. And you're seconding? I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into item D, intent to establish a bylaw dispute resolution system. Staff recommendation: the council authorize staff to request the Court Services Branch, Ministry of the Attorney General, to add the City of Nanaimo to the bylaw notice regulation. Moved and seconded. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the report, it says, in addition to, right in the background in the second sentence, I guess, it says, in addition to direct costs involved. So I was just wondering whether or not what cost would the city incur by developing a bylaw dispute resolution system?
Mr. Tucker?
This will allow us to apply to the Ministry of Attorney General to have Nanaimo added to the list of municipalities that make use of this regulation. In preparing that dispute resolution, we expect that we'll have to have it reviewed by the city solicitor to ensure that it meets the ministry's standards, and so there'll be costs associated with the legal fees.
And a follow-up as well. At the last paragraph and one of the last sentences, it says, if the city is successful in being added to regulation, could you tell us what the likelihood of it being added to the regulation?
The likelihood is very good. The reason it's being introduced to council at this point is so that we make the fall legislative session of the provincial legislature. Once we have that approval, then we'll go about developing the dispute resolution mechanism and bringing that back for council approval. So this is a first step to allow us to engage with the ministry and their staff to help us develop this dispute resolution. It is a cost-saving measure. It takes pressure off the court system. It allows us to go through an adjudication system locally without tying up court time, so the province is very supportive of this use of this mechanism.
Thank you.
Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Andrew Tucker, please, if I could. When the statement, when the city takes over the parking function, it is expected that there will be a significant increase in the number of bylaw disputes. Can you explain the rationale there, Andrew? No.
What the statement refers to is we are bringing in the parking function in-house, but we're also have made it known that we're going to be increasing the ambassadorial aspects of that and being more, possibly more forgiving of violations. And so this is just an expectation that there may be an increase in the number of disputes, that we'll have a softer heart possibly, and we want to be prepared for it by setting this mechanism in place.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no further questions. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Move into development permit DP 780 at 360-370 Westwood Road. We have two delegations, up to 10 minutes each. Mr. Taylor. Mr. Fred Taylor.
And council members, before the council is a request to reduce the riparian area setback from 15 meters to 0 meters. One may note approximately one-half of the staff report now is subject to 2 geotech reports. If you look at your pages 57 and 58, there's about better than a half. The first half of the page, first page and the last page deal with 2 new geotech reports. To quote the report, the subject property is subject to both aquatic and geotech setbacks now. With all the information about these new geotech reports, the public has been refused access to these reports. At this time, I ask Council to table this application till such time the reports are available to the public.
Is there a staff comment on that? Mr. Swibby?
Your Worship, staff believes that because there is a subdivision process that is underway, to hand out reports of this nature to the general public at this time might be misleading. And I say that because we work through the subdivision process over a number of weeks and months, and if those reports change, then the position might be that we're misleading the public. So certainly at the end of the process, the public is welcome to have a copy of those reports, but I don't think it's appropriate at this time.
Mr. Chair, it says here that there's been no change basically from about 1995 to now. So do you expect change overnight or something? Big earthquake or something?
I just follow Mr. Swaybe just made the statement that...
Your Worship, the other, maybe just to clarify too, and of course this is irrelevant to the application before council in terms of the aquatic variance, but the geotechnical reports, any geotechnical reports that are greater than 2 years old they're not useless, but they need to be updated. So we would ask any application that comes before us to update old geotechnical reports.
Okay, but the matter that we're dealing with here, this DP 780, is specifically dealing with the aquatic setbacks? That's correct. Thank you.
I do believe with limited information contained within the staff report, a reduction of half the 15-meter aquatic setback to basically equal the geotech setback provides a very simple one-measurement setback. And if I could take council to remember not too recently, the resort on the lake, Beaconsfield Road with development on 3rd Street, of all the intrusion into setbacks with buildings that you don't inspect, etc., where if we had a one-line setback, no build beyond there, I think it might be easier to control. although those setbacks right to the top of the bank apparently, or wherever the subdivision layout is, can still be counted into the area of the lot size, I believe. But it just, if you reduce everything to zero, you're liable to see accessory sheds and everything else on the top of this bank, because they're not controlled by permit. We're only proactive to police them, etc. And you've even, when you change use of land at, say, as an example, Westwood Resort on the Lake, you face a lot of buildings, etc. up there that are a problem. Never even been inspected. You know that. So I'm just concerned of some sort of a measure that you can say this is the line for geotech and this is the line for no build beyond, which is the aquatic setback, although it still can become part of somebody's backyard, even though there is a setback. And I think to join the two together and say one size is, of course, your decision.
Okay, we have a question, Councillor McKay.
Mr. Taylor, we went through this last meeting and
well, I would like to finish my presentation, please.
Oh, well, I thought you had a question on you.
I do, Your Worship.
Yeah.
On what I've just said?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I want to ask you, what is your concern, the geotechnical setback or the riparian setback?
Both.
Are we not dealing with the riparian tonight?
Yes, but I raised the geotech, and it's funny that 2/3 of your report deals with it tonight, sir, when it didn't deal with it, and you're only dealing with aquatic setback. So why is the geotech 2/3 of your report dealing with geotech? Pardon me?
Maybe we can direct that to staff.
Your Worship, the application was before Council at the previous meeting, and Council sent it back to staff for clarification of the geotech issues. That's not to say staff agree that that's something that should be reviewed as part of this, but that's why the report is dealing with the geotech issues. It was referred back for that purpose.
Okay.
To finish my presentation, and if you go to page 61 in your report, you'll see, which is on your screen now, and I've colored in green, which is what last time we were talking about a right-of-way, 74 RW. I've colored it green to show. And if we go to the next picture, you will see in page 69, it's there only in very faded, but I've highlighted in dotted green line. And including half of that, you call it park dedication. Sorry, 74 RW is Westwood Lake Park. It's not going to be a park dedication. It's already been dedicated by buying it with Westwood Lake. So why don't we take this strip anywhere else as well in the city and write park on it? If you look adjoining lands to this proposal, it's got park written on it. Why do we keep refusing to identify some lands as park? What's the reason? Why is this long strip not got the word park written on it? Next one, please. Here is the document on title of all Westwood lands. And there's one circle saying the council in taking these lands will protect it as park. Next one, please. And here, in the list of all the what you might call right-of-ways, which I look at as a number of a plan today, is all this land I'm talking about described right there on the title. Why can't we not write park on it? What's the problem? And yet we write park on other areas adjoining these lands. I don't understand.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. A question to staff, please, if I may. Just given the information, given the documentation, I have to ask the question, is this or is this not park?
Your Worship, it shows it on all the schedules as park, and I'll have Mr. Tucker explain further.
While this slide is up from Mr. Taylor's presentation, it's very hard to read, but in that paragraph that is circled, it explains that within Lot 6, the area of park dedication is 0.12 of an acre, more or less, which was at the time when the right-of-way was deeded to the city. And Mr. Blackwood, if you could put up the... So starting with the subject property, so the park is that linear strip that runs through the middle of the subject property, and that was deeded to the city. I believe it was registered in 1958, and it's that narrow strip. If you go to the next slide. You'll see this slide that you have here is on page 62 of the council agenda, and you'll see that the applicant has written on that proposed, I'll read the exact from, proposed future ESA dedication. Because it's a steeply sloping site, it's not suitable as park use for traditional park purposes, but it is suitable for ESA protection. And that portion of the property that is on the east side of the right-of-way is to be dedicated to the city. Next slide, please. So if the green that is the park that was dedicated in 1958, added to that will be the area shown in blue and also the area shown in yellow. So the entire block of the slope leading down to the creek will be dedicated to the city through a combination of park dedication and ESA protection. So the portion that Mr. Taylor had circled as park dedication was referring to a future park dedication which will be added to the existing right-of-way to make a linear park along this section of the creek.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to beg a little difference here because it's not what I've circled is to future park dedication. I guess you're calling it environmentally sensitive land, you're calling park dedication?
I'm not. It was in a report produced by the environmental consultant.
But my point here is we have a legal piece of land. Are you going to join it with other land and give it the same protective status as Westwood Lake on title? No, because you haven't done it with the rest of it. If you look downwards from that, it's been eliminated and joined as environmentally sensitive land. Where is our protected land by covenant? Where is it? And you take and say it's not useless as a park or something? Why did we accept a trail in the ravine in place of White Road south of Harmac? An very hard walkable trail in a ravine in place of a very good drivable road right to the waterfront on the south side of Harmac-Putnam. If you can do that, you can do it here. There's nothing wrong with this right-of-way. And I object to trying to eliminate anything that's on title.
Okay, we're
trying to hide it.
We're up to 12 minutes. Councillor Greaves, you had a point?
Well, thank you, Worship. Not that this is not a worthwhile discussion, but we're dealing with, if I'm not mistaken, a riparian setback. We're not dealing with parks or any of that stuff now. And as I said, that's a worthwhile discussion, but that is not what we're dealing with or supposed to be dealing with at the moment. We're just off topic.
I agree, Mr. Chair, and when you put maps before the public that have got problems, could the public not stand up and speak to them? Because it's long overdue to see Westwood Lake Parklands identified by even the word park.
Okay, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. I hope not to annoy my colleagues, but just as it relates to the explanation that you provided, Mr. Tucker, what's dedicated as a park, although it may not be suitable for a park, so the narrow strip that you indicated that is not suitable for a park, but it is an environmentally sensitive area or aquatic sensitive. So if it is, even if it is not suitable for a park and it is dedicated as a park, does it not remain a park? Even if we think it's not suitable to be called a park? In the technical aspect of what we're dealing with?
Your Worship, I believe that we're just disagreeing over what is already protected. Mr. Taylor believes all of it's already protected. We're suggesting that the title only protected the small strip. This application is proposing to protect all of it. Whether the mechanisms by Parkland or ESA area, I think the ESA area provides greater certainty for the types of uses that the public would expect to use. But for all intents and purposes, it's park just like the adjacent lands once it's dedicated through this application.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm concerned that you can sell subdivision parkland obtained by subdivision or environmentally sensitive land, this narrow strip, you technically shouldn't be allowed to sell or do anything with because you've accepted it on title as parkland. And if you consider you could have gone from Jinglepot Road right through to the dam at Westwood Lake on this walkway at one time.
Okay, we're going to deal now with 360, 370 Westwood Road. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now, there's also a delegation 10 minutes. Mr. Thurkel, do you want to come forward, please? And you also have up to 10 minutes.
Tried to do this in about 2 minutes. Thanks again. Charles Thurkel, 611 Shaughnessy Place. I haven't moved. And thank you for the kind words, Councillor Brennan. Appreciate your comments on the Fisheries Act. My concern with this application is, first of all, that I want to recognise that Fred Taylor sure keeps everybody on their toes, doesn't he? Hey? I'll remind Council that he once pointed out that the city actually owns land up in the Chase River area that staff didn't know about. He sure does his homework. And,
Okay, let's deal with this. Our time is running, sir. What is your point?
My point is I'm concerned about the steep slope issue here, regardless of whether it's technical. It's on the agenda, and I am concerned about that. I don't understand the short sections of the geotechnical report that staff has technically where it is redacted or edited or added into their recommendations. There's talk in there about a slope that's 26.5 degrees from the top of the bank and a slope that's 35 degrees from the toe of the bank at different lots. And that's a very steep slope, whichever way you look at it. And I question why that isn't available. I really do, because I frankly don't understand the comments that staff have put into their suggestions. It's not clear. But I'd also want to point out that Darra Creek is important beyond its fisheries values. The riparian zone, I can't see why anyone would want to put a lot line at the very, very top of the bank. We've already got lots of these in Nanaimo. There's one in Woodstream Park overlooking Departure Creek, and if you walk through there you'll see a big massive concrete structure that must weigh 5 tons to retain a fence where the bank has given way. I'm told that at one time there was a swimming pool overlooking Woodstream Park, and it's gone into the park, disappeared. I'll ask you to look in Bowen Park at some of those houses that are perched on stilts overlooking the ravine, and they are there forever until that is the next earthquake. And again, Darra Creek carries water from Westwood Lake to the Millstone River. Its importance is really that there's a siphon in the new dam that was put up there a few years ago. And it takes water to the river to sustain the bottom end of the river, including the side channel, put in by fisheries. So the importance of the creek goes beyond whether or not it supports fish and so on. But I'm just concerned that you'd want to put a fence line right on the top of a 35-degree slope. It doesn't make sense. The other concern that I've got here, and it's one that you might have heard before, some of you at least, is that this process, in my opinion, is a little bit flawed. The whole business of hiring a professional consultant, whether it's fisheries or geotechnical, and having that person paid by the developer to write a report. I have done that myself as a fisheries biologist, and I can tell you that there is pressure, sometimes subtle and sometimes not, to favor the person who's paying your check. It's the same monetary pressure that drives a developer to try and get the last square inch and the last dollar out of a piece of property. It's the same pressure that drives city staff to try and do the same, simply because they're trying to do the best for the city, for the economy. But I'm just saying that a few years ago, we used to have a position called environmental coordinator, and that person was a fisheries biologist, and he used to take a second sober look at these reports written by people who were hired by developers, and he used to say, well, yeah, okay, I hear your point, but is that actually so? Is this zero setback in the public interest? And that position doesn't exist. And I really question whether someone who isn't a fisheries biologist can make that call on staff at the present time, in engineering or whatever. I don't think that they really have the skills to do it. No disrespect to anybody. So that's basically about it. I'm just very nervous about building so close to the top of a ravine. And if you've ever walked into that ravine, it's very deep and very steep. And, the upgrades that were done to the Westwood Lake Dam recently to bring it up to seismic standards and so on, why bother doing that? Why bother spending millions of dollars on that dam and then building houses which may or may not be too close to the edge of that ravine? It's the same creek. So I would suggest something that, we've got tools in our toolkit that allow developers to get the maximum dollar for their property, density bonusing and whatever else it might be. And the other consideration is that, we're fitting the landscape to the lot here. We need to fit the lot to the landscape. I wonder if it's not possible, instead of asking for a variance on the setback, to ask for a variance on the lot size. And to say, well, yes, normally we would have a 100-foot length lot here, but because we're so close to a ravine, let's make it 90 feet or 80 feet. And just have someone accept the reality that they may need to live in a property that has a slightly smaller backyard, but they'll be at liberty to do whatever they want, build a garage or put in a swimming pool. And they can do that with impunity because you have had the foresight to protect them in perpetuity against a rash decision. So that's about it. I really thank you for your time again. And again, I'd urge everyone to make the decision based on their own principles, not try perhaps to second guess their own good judgment and vote in a way that would be contrary to their own moral beliefs, perhaps.
I think we do. Thank you, sir. I see no questions. So, dealing with the...
Your Worship?
Yes.
Just a reminder that we have one additional delegation on this topic.
Okay. So, sorry, I don't have the name on my list here.
Mark Warburg, I believe it is.
Mr. Warburg. Welcome, sir.
Mayor and Council. My name's Mark Warbrick from Newcastle Engineering Limited. I live at 1907 Carmel Place. Just want to clarify a few things and make a couple of points in the hope that it'll help. The land above the top of Bank's been used as a sheep farm in the past. There's no trees at all above the top of Bank. It's basically pasture land. The creek functions as a means at this point, given that it's dammed upstream, it functions to supply water to Bowen Park when the fishway needs additional flows in the fall. There's a couple of storm outfalls that are draining subdivisions further downstream than this property, but generally the flows are controlled by the manipulation of the valve at the dam. The distance from the top of Bank, which is where we're requesting the relaxation to the edge of the ravine, is about 50 to 60 meters. It varies, and it's very heavily vegetated with forest and undergrowth. The purpose of the relaxation is purely to allow the area of the lots to comply with the subdivision bylaw. The location of the buildings is governed by a completely different setback line, which is from the geotechnical report. So there'll be no issues with stability of buildings related to the relaxation because they will be governed by the setback line in that geotechnical report. So with that, if there's any questions that I can help with, otherwise...
Any questions of the delegation? Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Good evening. I know that I have to stay with the riparian subject and not to go the geotech way, but it is connected. And I wonder if you can explain to me in terms that I can understand what the difference was between the Lukowicz geotech engineering survey that was done in 1995 and the one that was done recently. There was two, actually. So I need to understand why it is no-go at one point and why, when the land has stayed the same, it can go now.
Well, the seismic rules upon which the engineer has to rely to write those reports have changed. They've gotten more strict. He has more information now than he had. He had a detailed survey of the bank before he prepared that report. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight to answer those questions, but the report was done in accordance with all the latest guidelines and the seismic rules, which is very well recognized in that field.
Thank you.
Councillor Kipp.
Worship, to the delegation, from the top of the bank, the dry bank, at the top of the edge of the property line now, straight out horizontally to the wet bank down below, how far is it?
It varies, but 50 to 60 meters is
50 to 60 meters.
Yeah.
And the old top of the bank there, really, at the top of the ravine, would require either the dam to break to have that high of a water level, or glaciation?
I don't know that the dam breaking could even get anywhere near that elevation because of the way the water would flow down the ravine. And if you recall, the city spent a fairly good amount of money recently stabilizing that dam with shot rock.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions on it. I just a final thing. Before you go, Mark, there were several statements made tonight. Was there anything that you disagreed with in the statements made, or do you feel that is inconsistent rather with your views, your professional?
A lot of the comments about the 74RW strip, which, if I recall correctly, used to be an old water main right of way. All of our area calculations completely acknowledge that that strip is not part of our client's property. There's no inclusion of that area in any of our calculations.
Okay, that's good. That's helpful. Thank you, sir. Oh, wait a minute. Is this?
I just want to make a motion.
Okay. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that Council issue development permit number DP 780-360/370 Westwood Road to vary the required riparian area setback from 15 meters to 0 meters for a portion of the subject property which represents a riparian area setback variance of 15 meters.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Second. Any further discussion? Councillor Patchy.
Well, Your Worship, I'll be speaking against that because I have a motion of my own, which I can deal with at your pleasure.
I think we should deal with the motion that's on the floor and render that either passed or failed. So if there's nothing else...
Well, then, if I may comment then on the motion here. Well, first of all, the irony doesn't escape me that we just dealt with agenda item 8C, where we are asking for protection under the Fisheries Act of Canada because there are some threats to it. And here we are dealing with a request to reduce the riparian zone from 15 meters to zero. Darrow Creek is a really important one in that it supplies water on an annual basis from Westwood Lake to the Millstone River. For fisheries, that is extremely important, and I wouldn't want to take a chance with it. From another person other than Mr. Thurkel, I also heard that now with the new year-round flow, the potential of being good cutthroat trout habitat, since Darrow Creek has high gradient gravel areas sought and needed by the trout for spawning, any runoff from construction will seriously jeopardize this rare spawning area for the cutthroat trout. You know, while we are doing a lot of infill and densification, and I'm glad we are, but I'm also very cognizant of the fact that that puts pressure on our streams and our creeks and our small rivers. And that pressure will only increase as time goes on. And I am really not willing to take a chance on doing something towards a very important creek. You know, when we dealt with the subdivision at 3rd and Howard, we all had it pointed out that off Beaconsfield, in times earlier than when any of us were on this council, riparian rights were kind of messed with, and the long and the short of it was that people's backyards are right on the edge of the Cat Stream. Not a good thing, and I believe staff concurred that that was a bit of a strange thing to have happened. So I don't see really much difference with the situation that we're faced with today, particularly not with steep slope, 30, 35 degrees, one bit of a shake and rattle, and who knows what might go into that creek. I really cannot support going from 15 to 0. It is taking a chance. It also, I believe, sends the wrong message to the development industry that it's okay to do that. And in some instances, a reduction in riparian zones might be appropriate, and I just do not believe that this is the place to do that. So I will not be supporting the motion.
Okay, I was going to ask, there's a couple other questions there, but to either the staff or to the delegation, I mean, can someone deal with the matter of the threat to the cutthroat that's been alleged, and or the delegation? Councillor, sorry.
Your Worship, I can't speak specifically to that. I can speak specifically to the recommendation that the professional biologist made as part of this application, that in his opinion the setback down to 0 is warranted, and maybe the applicant has more information. I'm not aware of it, but that's all I can say, is that the biologist that has been hired would have identified if there was an issue to be concerned with.
Okay, you're not the delegation, sir. Thank you. Ms. Warbrick?
I have to be careful not to step out of my area of expertise, but just all I can say is that the culvert at Westwood Road is a barrier to fish passage, so I'm not sure how cutthroat trout can get into the creek unless they go down that siphon. So Mr. Thurkel might be able to clarify that, but...
Okay, well, it was actually more Councillor Patchy's concern that we were trying to get addressed, but that's fine. We appreciate their help on it then. Okay, Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. We haven't had an opportunity to speak to the developer. But in the report, the previous report, there was reference to the project not being viable because they require that setback to allow those 4 additional lots, 12, 13, 14, and an additional one in Phase 2. There's 23 lots proposed in the overall subdivision, is that correct? I believe that's what I read in the report.
Yes, Your Worship.
At any rate, if the setback was changed to 7.5 from 0, would the 4 lots be viable then?
Your Worship, the applicant, the owner's representative is here. That's Mr. Warbrick can answer that, but staff's opinion is you would lose at least 1 lot. You'd have to make the lots wider and less depth.
And would that make or break the subdivision?
That would be something more appropriately addressed to the applicant, I believe.
May I address the applicant, Your Worship?
Sure. Mr. Warbrick, do you want to assist with us on this? Did you hear the question?
I did. Without redrawing the map, the subdivision layout, I expect it we'd lose 2 lots. I can't tell you whether it would eliminate the viability of the project. Don't have the calculations.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Always challenging when we're talking about environmentally sensitive areas and development and impact and the balance so that we are protecting the future and allowing for progress. It sounds like when we say 15 to 0 that we are at the water's edge. It sounds like we are right on the creek, if you will, or the water per se, the water bed. And as I understand it, that's clearly not the case. And clearly, from what I understand, there will not be foundations or buildings or otherwise homes built at the water's edge. It's 50 to 70, I think if I heard correctly, meters or feet, regardless, and considerable trees and flora and so on. So while I'm one of those members of council that have advocated quite strongly for the protection of our environmentally sensitive areas, I feel as though that this does have its environmentally sensitive protection. By going 15 to 0 sounds like we don't have any, but in fact there is, and the buildings proper will still have a buffer on these lots by what I understand to be in a neighborhood of 25 to 30 feet to the top of the bank from the back of a building or the back of a home. So, Your Worship, if I could just have clarification from staff, where a footprint of a building would be to the top of the bank of a home, to the top of the bank, how many feet would that encompass?
Mr. Tucker?
Yes, and I'll ask Mr. Blackwood to put up the map, site plan again. Because I think if council sees it on the plan, might explain. Councillor Bestwick is correct in that the distance to the actual creek is in the order of 50 to 60 meters. If you go to the next slide, please. On this slide, you'll see where the top of the bank is. Those closely packed lines that appear as gray shading is the steep slope that goes down to the creek, and the creek is at the bottom of that slope. So the top of the bank is where it begins to be paler because the contour lines are less closely packed. You'll see there are 4 lots along the edge of that slope, and within those 4 lots you have a dotted line which shows the approximate building location. So certainly on the top 2 they are well back from the edge of that's lots 12 and 13. The lots closer to the bottom, they're closer, but they would be outside of the area of the geotechnical setback. So Councillor Bestwick's description of them being set back from the top of the bank, there's 7.5 meters from the rear property line, and then you've got 50 to 60 meters before you get to the creek. So they're a considerable distance back from the creek itself.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had the opportunity of going and actually looking at this property along with Councillors Patchy and Johnstone, and I feel comfortable with what our staff have said. I am not expert in riparian rights and all of these other types of things. A delegation came to Council and made a presentation. Council asked for more information, and our staff went back and got more information for us, and they still say that we should support it. So I am in support of what our staff is saying, and I will continue to support it. And I think that it's important that we just move forward with it instead of continuing to debate it when we've already asked for the information and got the information that we've already requested. And I don't think anyone here at this table has the expertise to be saying that our staff is incorrect about this issue.
Okay, Councillor Brennan.
I agree with Councillor Anderson, Your Worship. In the first instance, there was some concern that perhaps we didn't have adequate information. Our staff has had another look at it and has come back with this recommendation. And the professional biologist, whether or not you like the system, the facts are that it was a professional fisheries biologist. I'm assuming they have credentials. I'm assuming they have standards of practice, and they have ethical standards as well that as a profession they have to meet. I don't have sufficient background to argue the case. I think that the point about having someone on staff that can is a good one, but at this point, the expertise of our staff says that this is adequate, with the additional information that the creek itself is considerable distance from the end of the top of the land. So, I'm comfortable, but I understand the trepidation we might have, but we don't have the professional background to make those judgments, and I think we need to go with our staff on this.
I tend to agree. Councillor Kipp.
I support the recommendation. I guess the anomaly that I find on this one is it's the wet bank versus the dry bank, where this is top of bank. It's so far up the bank. It's so far from the creek. I believe it's protected. I do agree with Mr. Taylor possibly that there needs to be names on these parks and zoning attached to every piece of it. And I appreciate that. But my point on this one, I measured on our map simply about it. It's anywhere between 30 to 60 meters from the top of the bank to that creek at a 30% grade. I think that really does protect that area and helps plan the subdivision, the road network, and that works out better because of the slope and the remainder of the property. So I support the motion and call the question.
As do I. So we'll give the last word to Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to clarify that I'm not doubting anybody's qualifications. That's not the point. As Councillor Anderson referred, the three of us went to have a look, and I did not like what I saw. It's a steep slope that can be susceptible to all sorts of influences, and maybe I shouldn't go by gut feeling, but I am by gut feeling that this is asking for danger, besides the fact that I believe it sends the wrong message when we know that we are going to get more and more pressure on riparian zones, and so I'm still not prepared to support it.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. Does everyone understand the motion, or should we have it read? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Pachi, Councillor Johnson opposed. To balance the council in favor, the motion passes. We're going to development permit, DP 781 at 650 Terminal Avenue. Staff recommendation the council issue development permit number DP 781 at 650 Terminal Avenue with a variance to allow parking in the front yard of Phase 1 Building D. Move the recommendation. Seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Development variance permit DVP 194 at 1135 Farquhar Street. Staff recommendation that council direct staff to proceed with the required statutory notification for development variance permit, DVP 194 at 1135 Farquhar Street. You moved? Sorry? Moved and seconded. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into liquor license application number LA number 80, the Canby at 63 Victoria Crescent. We have a delegation. Mr. Sam Yahia. Welcome, sir. You have up to 10 minutes.
Good evening, Your Worship, council members. I thank you very much. I just wanted to come and just personally represent the property. I have been the property owner down on Victoria Crescent for some 18 years, trying desperately to see what we can do to revitalize that area. I remember in 2006 when we had actually secured a permit to put in a liquor store, and we had made a contribution to the DNBIA for $10,000 towards lighting. We still haven't seen the lighting. For some reason, that Victoria Crescent keeps on getting neglected, keeps on getting, if you will, overlooked. There's a lot of storefronts that are empty. That doesn't do anything to the community. Nothing would be greater than to have an operation and a vital block in that area. We have asked for an extension of liquor hours till 1:30, this being the policy that the previous council had adopted. As you know, a number of the establishments on that block have got licenses till 2 o'clock in the morning. That still puts us at a disadvantage, but we have to take baby steps towards the goal of making Victoria Crescent more appealing, and we're doing everything we can in that effort. We have a very solid and well-connected relation with the community, with the RCMP, with the liquor inspectors, and we continue to try and actually create a venue for independent music, for local talent. And I'm thrilled and very, very proud of what it is we've achieved. But certainly Victoria Crescent needs all the support that it can get. Up until this point, it's still, if you will, behind in terms of the evolution. It hasn't enjoyed the success that the other part of the downtown district has. But we will continue to do everything in our part to make it more appealing and more successful, and be connected to the community and remain as responsible corporate citizens.
Okay, sir. We do have a question. Councillor Pachi.
Thank you, Worship. To staff, if I may. If we approve this puts yet another dent in the original plan to have different exit hours from bars. It gets closer and closer to everybody coming out to same. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yes, Your Worship. The hours of closing policy was set by council, so the original restriction on closing hours that was in the original liquor strategy was reviewed and changed in council's wisdom to the 1:30 closing time. As Mr. Yahia says, the application in front of council allows him to be in keeping with that new closing time, which is 1:30 p.m. So he's requesting that that it be brought into compliance or consistency with the other operators.
May I have a follow-up? Mr. Yahia, is the Canby part of the Trioscope program?
We do not have, we are part of the Bar Watch. We do not, we have not adopted the Trioscope. The premise of actually swiping your driver's license, we find it a very intrusive exercise. We have a relationship with the RCMP. We invite them to be on our premises and to inspect our premises as often as possible. I guess I'm from an older generation, and swiping my driver's license before I want to go and have a pint of beer is not something that I'm prepared to do, and I think a lot of our guests are also of that same nature. So we have not found ourselves in a position where we are targeted in terms of either gang activity or a lot of complaints. So I'm very happy with the protocol and the vigilance that we have demonstrated on our property. But at this point in time, we don't operate like a nightclub, and I know the Trioscope applies to those nightclub licenses, but we really are a neighborhood pub, and I prefer to remain that way.
Well, having sat on Safe Nanaimo for 3.5 years and having attended a fair number of Bar Watch meetings, the picture that I have is that everybody else in town, including the RCMP, would really very much like you to rethink that position, because it is of immense value to what we're trying to do downtown. Now, that said, I'm going to vote for this extension, but I really hope that you will give that some more thought, because it is an amazingly effective and good tool that does not affect the other operators as you seem to think it might. Please think about it one more time.
From my understanding, Councillor Pachi, the pub operations don't have the Trioscopes. That's my understanding of it. But I could be wrong, and I apologize about that if I am.
The large ones of your size all do.
That's incorrect. Then you're more informed than I am. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, we have Councillor Brennan.
If you are ready for the motion, Your Worship, I'd like to make it.
Okay, Councillor Anderson, did you have something? Okay, so you're making the motion?
Yes, I would move the council directs.
Which is
Council
staff recommendation?
recommend the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch to support the application for a permanent change to an existing licensed establishment at 63 Victoria.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor, unanimous, sorry. Thank you, sir. That's all there is.
Thank you.
Moving into Property Maintenance Bylaw 1990, number 3704. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to property maintenance. What's that?
All of those properties have been removed from the agenda.
Yeah, I should have run a line through the whole thing. Apologize for that. Unresolved building deficiencies, bylaw contravention notice. It's resolved that council herein wishing to speak with respect to unresolved building deficiencies for the properties listed below. Staff recommendation to council by resolution instruct the manager of legislative services to file a bylaw contravention notice respecting the properties listed below at Land Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia under Section 5.7 of the Community Charter. The first property is 1699 Bowstring Close, illegal construction, finished basement to include a secondary suite. Is there anyone in attendance that'd like to speak to matters related to 1699 Bowstring Close? The second property is 5035 Rihanna Place, illegal construction, addition to existing deck. Anyone in attendance who would like to speak to matters related to 5035 Rihanna Place? And the third and final one is 1180 Townsite Road, illegal construction, addition to existing deck and above-ground swimming pool. Anyone in attendance who would like to speak to matters related to 1180 Townsite Road? I trust Mr. Hickey, it's not your property. So if somebody would like to make the move the staff recommendation, move. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Unresolved building deficiencies, marijuana grower operation at 1519 Chalfont Road. It's requested that council herein wishing to speak with respect to the unresolved building deficiencies at that site, 1519 Chalfont Road. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak to matters related to Chalfont Road? Staff recommendation that by resolution instruct the manager of legislative services to file a bylaw contravention notice respecting 1519 Chalfont Road, grow operation with illegal construction, enclosed carport, plumbing, and electrical alterations of the Land Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia under Section 5.7 of the Community Charter. So I'd like to move that. Moved and second. Moved and second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into illegal grow operation at the same location, 1519 Chalfont Road. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak to with respect to the illegal grow operation at 1519 Chalfont Road. I don't see a sea of hands out there. I assume there's nobody in attendance. Staff recommendation that council, pursuant to section 7.2 and 7.3 of the community charter, order the owners of 1519 Chalfont Road to remove the structure or bring it up to standard within 30 days. If someone would like to move that. Move. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Corporate services, MSP premiums for seniors. Staff recommendation that council consider adopting the following resolution regarding MSP premiums for seniors for submission to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, UBCM, for consideration at the 2012 convention, and it reads as follows: whereas medical services plan MSP premiums can be a hardship for seniors on fixed income, and whereas raising health care monies through the provincial income tax system is a fairer process, therefore be it resolved that the Union of British Columbia Municipalities urge the provincial government to end MSP premiums for seniors to replace those funds through the income tax system. So moved. Second. Discussion. Any? Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just quickly through you to staff, is there any indication how much that would incur on the income tax system per average family?
We haven't done that research, Your Worship, and it would depend on their income level.
Yeah, good, thank you.
I guess the reality is that somebody's going to have to pay for it, and if it's not paid in separate MSP payments, which it is now done, it goes on income tax, and sometimes the government seems to have a view of re-examining everything, and I just would hope that the cost to the consumer, senior or not, wouldn't be higher as a result of it, but that remains to be seen. Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Worship. I guess through you to staff, well, first of all, I'd like to make a comment. I guess we're trying to catch up to many other provinces that do this, and the seniors don't have to pay their MSP premiums, but does not British Columbia have a means test? Does anybody know that?
I think, go ahead.
Your Worship, I know that you don't have to pay MSP premiums if your income's below a certain level, and then you pay more as your income increases up to the base level.
So, following up on that, so if someone can't afford to pay it, it gets paid for them.
Subject to that income test, yeah.
And secondly, if it goes to the income tax, then there are younger families that will be paying for the seniors, I guess.
Well, I would assume that it simply means that the seniors, instead of paying monthly on this thing, it would be added to the income tax. But is there any staff comment on that?
Your Worship, I don't think we haven't done that level of research. I think this was as a result of the delegation that came last meeting, and they asked Council to consider this and forward it to UBCM, and Council indicated that it would like to, so we've brought it forward.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan. Oh, sorry, Councillor Greaves, are you finished?
Yes, thank you. I think I have one. This is an old resolution. We brought it forward last year at the UBCM, did we not? Kind of difficult to say we don't want to do it now. Thanks.
Councillor Brennan.
Yeah. The income tax system is simply a fairer tax. I mean, premiums are simply a tax. They're just not based on your income, so that everyone pays the same thing, whether you are working poor or whether you're wealthy. So everyone pays the same tax. So it's not seemed to be as fair a system as using the income tax system. And when you're looking at the health system, which we are, we have agreed nationally that our healthcare system is universally available. So it's not just available to people with money or not. It's available to everyone. And using the income tax system speaks to that universality. Using the premium system sort of flies in the face of universality. So those are the reasons why I would support this. It just is a fairer tax. And when you have premiums or fees, those are regressive taxes and inherently unfair.
Okay, the motion, of course, is that this be referred to UBCM for consideration.
So moved.
Moved and seconded, but I think it's been moved and seconded, hasn't it? So all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into 7th Street. Sorry?
Oh, I'm just chatting to myself, sorry.
Move into the 7th Strait of Georgia National Marine Conservation Area. Staff recommendation that Council receive the report regarding Southern Strait of Georgia National Marine Conservation Area.
Staff recommendation.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Move into Community Services. The Nanaimo Athletic Commission minutes of the meeting held 16 May 2012. And these are to be introduced by the Nanaimo Aquatic Chair, Councillor Kipp.
Yes, Your Worship, the Council received the minutes of the meeting of the Nanaimo Athletic Commission held May 16th, 2012. So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The number 1 reservoir energy recovery equipment request for proposal. Staff recommendation that Council receive the report regarding the number 1 reservoir energy recovery equipment request for proposal. Would like to move that? Moved by Councillor Brennan, second by Councillor Johnson. I see no questions. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into the blue community designation, and there's a correspondence letter dated 2012, January 22nd, from Mr. Jim Goetz, President, Canadian Beverage Association, in support of Council's decision to rescind the blue community resolutions and to encourage Council to take no further action on this issue. So we'll move it down into, it's basically a staff request for direction. The Council direction is sought regarding endorsing the City of Nanaimo as a blue community. And so I see Councillor Anderson. Would you like to... I noticed your blue shirt, sir, and carry on.
Yes, I'm wearing a blue shirt today, yes. Thank you for noticing. I thought it would match my eyes. But anyways, I would actually like that if we were to vote on each of the resolutions individually.
Okay. So you want to deal with one separately then?
Like what? Well, I mean the resolutions that the blue communities people brought forward to us. The one being adopting it a human right. The second one, the public.
We have the list handy to put up.
You have it right in front of you.
There, item 1, 2, and 3 under the background.
John, you have it right in front of you.
Recognizing water as human right.
Mr. Chair, you have them right in front of you. Actually, on the
this one here.
Nanaimo City Council paper.
Wait a minute. Reaching for it. There we go. This one here. Now, the only thing is we do need maybe some staff clarification on one issue, and that is that we did have an opinion, a legal opinion from our solicitor saying that in their opinion, the matter of declaring water or recognizing water as a human right is beyond the jurisdiction of the municipalities, and only the federal government and provincial government can make that determination. Mr. Hickey, go ahead.
Mayor Chan, that is correct. Yes, we did get that information from our solicitor. So this motion to make water as a human right is really largely responding to that on local government level.
So, Your Worship, in response to that advice, we've included in the motion a whereas statement that says, whereas it is recognized that international treaties, human rights, and water rights are matters of federal and provincial jurisdiction, just so that Council does recognize that.
Okay. Councillor Bessick?
No, I don't think so, Your Worship. I was going to just recommend that Council endorse the City of Nanaimo as a blue community, as it identifies in our green sheets as number 1. But as I'm understanding that there might be 3 other motions done independent of that.
Councillor Bestwick's proposition is that in order to become a blue community, you have to first adopt that water is a human right, then secondly say that you support publicly financed and owned wastewater services, and then the last one is banning the sale of bottled water and public facilities and at municipal events. So I was hoping that we would be able to vote on each of those resolutions individually.
Well, let's go back to the first item, and maybe I'll get some input from staff on this. But I don't want to reiterate what has already been said, but what's already been said is that we have a legal opinion saying that only the federal government and the provincial government has the right or has the jurisdiction to recognize water as a human right. So I'm not sure how we would vote on that, giving a legal opinion that we have.
Mayor Rattan, on page 134 of starting on page 134 at the bottom is the start of a recommended resolution that is in the Blue Communities guideline, and that has been updated by the city's solicitor, and so that is the motion that you could pass there that would suffice as water as a human right, and so that would be the motion to be done for that component.
Those are items 1 through 4 at the top of 134?
134 bottom, whereas one of 6 people around the world, going through to the end of that is the resolution that is recommended to be passed.
Move, therefore, it be resolved that council agrees with the proposition that access to clean water is a fundamental human right.
Second.
Be it further resolved that the council calls on the federal and provincial to enshrine water as a human right in federal and provincial law. Be it further resolved that council calls on the Government of Canada to support the recognition of water as a human right in international law. So I make those motions.
Move to Mr. Kenny,
I'd just like to recommend that council include the whereas clauses as well in the motion, so it makes clear the rationale, so that when it...
Well, I would like to include from page 134, the first whereas, through to what I read out.
That's what I believe council should do, because that recognizes that
That's your motion?
Yes, it is. Or is it yours, George?
I don't know.
I'll take it.
Whoever wants to take credit for it, please do. And so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we're going to see if we can... sorry, go ahead. Yes, and the council directs staff to implement the plan to transition. That's one?
No, yeah, we need to do the one about promoting publicly financed, owned, and operated water and wastewater services now.
Okay.
So, sure, I'll move it. Where does the whereas? Is there any whereases on?
I don't know. Is there a reason this wasn't put in the agenda?
Your Worship,
Under the green pages.
What we're trying to do is Councillor Anderson has asked that these be recognized, treated individually. They're listed individually 1, 2, and 3 on page 133, which is what I believe Councillor Anderson is asking Council to consider. Council has approved item 1 through all those resolutions. Item 2, there is no breakdown of whereas and therefore be it resolved. So I would recommend that if Council wants to do this, it would simply pass what's specified on item 2 there. Council promotes publicly funded, owned, and operated water and wastewater services. And so I'd recommend that that be the motion.
Councillor Bennett.
Did Councillor Anderson move that?
No, I didn't.
Okay, then I am moving that.
Oh, okay. I'll second that. Okay. Then I will. Okay.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Okay. On that motion, everyone's aware of it.
I just have a question for, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through to you, to our city manager. In the last presentation, I asked a question in the case that the city had to purchase water, for example, if that would conflict with the resolution, and the president of QPPC wouldn't give me a yes or no answer, so I'm going to ask you, what's your opinion on that?
Your Worship, our interpretation is laid out in the report, and it says that the primary implication of a resolution such as this, we specifically referred to the one passed in 2006, is the support of publicly controlled water services for the city. The Blue Community Resolution uses the term promotes. Staff interpret that support and promote, or that support or promote mean public water services are the objective, although alternate supply may be considered. So we're interpreting it as an objective rather than as an outright statement. That's all you would do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I have Councillor Bessert, Councillor Kipp, Councillor McKay, and Councillor Patchy. Everyone still want to speak in that order?
No, I'm done, Your Worship.
You're done? Okay, Councillor Kipp, you're done. So we're down to Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship.
You're on.
I would like to know if we could just endorse the resolution of March 13th, 2006 in its entirety. We've already passed that.
Yeah, that motion is already on the books, and so council is continuous.
It's been dealt with.
My personal opinion is you don't need to do this at all. I'm interpreting council's intention that you want to do it again, and I think you could do it the way the motion's on the floor would be satisfactory.
Thank you.
Councillor Patchy, you have a question?
Yes, I do, to staff. On the top of page 136, you say staff believes the intent of this resolution meets with the intent of the Blue Community designation. Have you had any conversations with the people that came here as delegations to verify if that is indeed the case?
Ratan, in response to Councillor Patchy's question, yes, I talked with Paul Manley. It was actually his father that went to council in 2006 for this resolution, and he says this resolution on council's books does meet the requirement for publicly financed, owned, and operated water and wastewater services.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so no further questions. Question on the motion, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And bylaws with no accompanying.
Your Worship, there's a third one, I think, that Councillor Anderson would like considered, and that's proceeding with the banning the sale of bottled water in public facilities and at municipal events.
And Councillor Brennan, that was your motion to?
I'm making the motion on page 137, staff's recommendation that the following implementation plan and timelines.
Are we voting on the third resolution that says we're banning bottled water on the...
Yes, because you would have this implementation plan that would ultimately end up with water.
You made the motion?
Made the motion to...
Did you want to speak to it, or are you happy the way it is?
I think we've spoken to it.
I think we've beaten it to death, but there's still some more beaters here. Councillor Johnstone.
Would the word banned be better replaced with phase out? Because we can't ban immediately. We have to phase it out because we have contracts with the suppliers.
In response to Councillor Johnstone's question, we're really saying this is a transition from selling bottled water to promoting and using municipal tap water. And in Councillor Brennan's recommendation, it's really following the implementation plan, which doesn't really talk about banning in any way.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to, do we get a seconder for this motion at this point? No?
Yes, I second.
Yeah, I thought Dan did.
So in essence, I would agree that we go with point 2, that council directs staff to implement the plan to transition from selling bottled water to promoting and using municipal tap water in the City of Nanaimo parks, recreation, and culture facilities. So the implementation plan is essentially that.
Ms. Harrison, go ahead.
Just for clarification, that was my understanding of the motion that Councillor Brennan had made. Am I incorrect?
When Councillor Anderson asked me, is that the ban? I said, well, yes, because when you have implemented this, the end of the implementation would mean the end of bottled water sales. So in effect, it would be, but I don't care what word we use, withdraw, ultimately withdraw, eventually withdraw, over time withdraw, whatever, but the end result is.
Just to clarify, I understand that it's the staff recommendation number 2 that was moved and seconded, as shown on our green sheets?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In this last one, I've tried to find ways to say yes to banning the sale of bottled water in municipal facilities and at public events, but I haven't really been able to find the reason as to why we would do so. When you look at the school district, for example, they chose to ban Coke and all of those other types of things from vending machines because there were unhealthy aspects to those types of things, such as sugar and ongoing things such as that. So they chose to remove those from vending machines. if we're looking at it from the plastic component, if we're going to be banning water bottles, we might as well ban every single bottle that is inside those vending machines, because they all have plastic. And one of the other things as well is that once you remove bottled water from the vending machines, you leave much unhealthier options such as Coke and electrolyte drinks, which have a lot of sugar inside of them as well. So before I continue, I just have a couple of questions to staff, if I may. In the report, it says that there's an estimate of $5,000 will be required for both the education and updates to existing fountains over the next 3 years. This plan for the $5,000 does not include new water fountains. Or does it?
Your Worship, to answer the question, really it is to look at upgrading existing fountains. We're looking at promoting municipal tap water in municipal facilities, our recreation facilities, which do have fountains in all of them, but it would be to upgrade them so they can be used with refillable bottles as opposed to having plastic bottle sales.
If I may follow up, so that means only to existing fountains, so that doesn't include the areas in which we do not have fountains that are accessible to the public.
Your Worship, so with my understanding of the Blue Community Project and other cities, what they've done is to look at the implementation of the banning of the sales of bottled water in our facilities. We don't necessarily sell bottled water in other areas, so there is infrastructure in place in some of them, such as Fields or at Westwood Lake. If there would need to be upgrades done to those types, then we could look at doing that. And then what it also allows for within it for each plan is that where it is more feasible or where water isn't available in the transition stage, that we can look at still having either bottled water or other options available to people.
So if I may continue, I think that there probably is a much higher number than that, because I can think of many other municipal facilities and parks that don't have water fountains, and even the building that we're in right now, there's not one water fountain inside of it as well. So I think if we're going to be banning the sale of bottled water, we should make sure that water is accessible to everyone inside of all of our, inside the community. So I just think this is probably a little too much of a big brother type of issue, and I don't see why council would, as Councillor Brennan said when people were discussing the recording of Committee of the Whole meetings, I haven't had anyone coming to talk to me about banning bottled water. And in my opinion, if I should be able to choose to drink a bottle of water, and I should be able to choose between drinking municipal tap water. So I would much rather see us promote municipal tap water and only do that, but not get rid of the choice between bottled water and having municipal tap water available. I've just recently read a book about, it's called New Liberalism by Matthew Coltman, and it talks about timeless freedoms. And I think this is one of the things that we're taking away from the people in our community about taking something such as bottled water. If someone chooses to want to drink a bottle of water, I don't see why they shouldn't be able to do so. Our own medical health officer from VHA has even said that both bottled water and tap water, they're both comparably regulated for safety. Tap water under the Provincial Drinking Water Protection Act, and bottled water under the Federal Food and Drugs Act and Regulation. So I don't really see why we would be banning the sale of bottled water whatsoever. So I just think this is too overarching, and I don't see why we're taking people's choice of the matter out inside the facilities that they own and they pay for. Just because I was elected as a councillor doesn't mean that I should be able to put my own moral beliefs on someone else's. If I don't want to drink bottled water, I shouldn't be able to tell 98,000 other people that because I was elected by, unfortunately, less than 10% of the public, that I should be saying you can't drink bottled water in the facilities that you own and you pay for. And it's the same with our municipal events as well. And that to tell someone who's having an event there that they can't sell bottled water is too overarching. So I won't be supporting the motion.
Okay. Councillor Greaves, did you have... Yes. You're on. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was going to agree with everything Councillor Anderson said, but I can't remember it all. But I can't agree to this third resolution. In all seriousness, as long as the city offers an alternative with municipal water, and what we're doing is not illegal or unsafe, I can't see any reason to ban bottled water or work towards removing bottled water. We ban smoking in public parks. That's because it's unsafe and stinky and so on and so forth, and secondhand smoke. And we've also tried to encourage electric vehicles by having charging stations, but we didn't ban cars from the road. So, I could very easily just say, sure, what's $5,000 or $8,000? But I can't get past the fact that I don't know who thought of this whole thing? 4 guys in a bar on a Friday night, maybe. And again, I don't know where this comes from. I see where it's going. I understand it. But, if we had 5 or 6 resolutions, I'm sure one of us wouldn't like. So now we can't be a blue community because we don't like one of these. Well, in this case, one of these 3 resolutions. So I don't like this last one, so I guess I can't vote in favor of being a blue community. So I'm not going to vote in favor of this resolution.
Okay, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. This is extremely interesting. We do sell alcoholic beverages in our municipal facilities, and we seemingly don't have a problem with that. And so I kind of question, and it helps pay for the facilities and helps pay for the experience and all those other good things that people desire. However, having said that, as it relates to this particular topic of we're not telling people they can't drink bottled water in municipal facilities. I think the statement that we're making is that simply they're not going to be able to purchase it in municipal facilities. And if they happen to have a plastic bottle or a thermos or whatever, that we're going to make the ability for them to fill those up with tap water more convenient and safe and all those things. So I don't know what the motion is on the floor. Is it to ban or is it to phase out? I'm sorry, I'm not positive where we are.
Ms. Harrison?
The motion on the floor, as I understand it, is point 2 under this particular item on the agenda, that Council directs staff to implement the plan to transition from selling bottled water to promoting and using municipal tap water in City of Nanaimo parks, recreation, and culture facilities.
So with that said, then I understand that mean to phase out, which, if I'm correct, which I would understand then to mean at the expiration of the vending contracts that we have with the providers of the vending machines, is that, and or in the concessions, or so transitioning out, is that when the contract expires, or what does that mean?
Mayor Rattan, in response to that question, the transitioning out is this fall we would have no sales in the concessions that are in facilities and encourage everyone to use tap water. And then in the next year, we'd be working to just get community groups to consider using tap water if they would like to or chose to in city-owned facilities that are run by other agencies like the Port Theatre or the Curling Club. And the last idea would be that we just promote tap water for special events, and that would be the case where they could choose to sell bottled water or tap water, but it would be an educational idea.
So at the expiration of the contracts, there won't be bottled water available?
No, we would be updating the contracts for this fall. We've got a clause to be able to provide notice, and we would provide notice to the vendors that have contracts in our facilities that there would be no bottled water sold, and in the vending machines.
Okay, I think they're saying the same thing.
I think so.
Thank you.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm in support of the plan to transition. I think it's a little bit too aggressive at this point in time. To Councillor Anderson's point relative to the mix that they have in the machines, I would really much rather that we let the consumer make the decision. We're very much into recycling now, so you see garbage cans all over the city where, folks very carefully put their can, because there's no place to recycle it, they'll put their recyclable can on top so that somebody can come along and take it and possibly recycle it. I've seen examples in Surrey where you've got a large school that had 12 to 13 vending machines. When they were replaced with refillable water machines and everybody got on board and started buying their containers, their water bottles, those machines now, by choice of the consumer, have now gone down to one machine. And I think that one machine is leaving the facility only because there's nobody making any money on it anymore, because the consumer at that school has determined that they'd like to use their refillable water bottles. I'd like to see it go that way, as opposed to this ban in 6 months from now or 4 months from now. All-out ban. I think it's just a wee bit too aggressive.
Okay, Councillor Pachi.
Thank you, Worship. Question to staff, if I may. Second paragraph from the top on page 137. You already talked about the $5,000 when Councillor Anderson spoke. The sentence, however, if the city was to look at investing in an event water wagon and other significant capital upgrades, there would be an increase of funding required. Have you got any idea what kind of money you're talking about?
Mayor Rattan, in response to that, where we're looking at significant capital upgrades, if we really wanted to get water to some of the parks that we don't currently have water fountains, but we don't sell bottled water there either, so that would be one. So we're not anticipating that would happen. And the event wagon, we thought that in a couple of years we could look to do what the Greater Nanaimo or Greater Vancouver Water District does, or the Capital Victoria region, where they have a water wagon that goes to special events and would do what, same as Councillor McKay is saying, that you would have some sort of water supply and then circumvent using bottled water at events. And I don't know the cost of those, but we would have to look into that.
Okay. And the final question, Your Worship, then. Do I understand the motion correctly, then, that has these 3 staff recommendations in it? Too much talk. I'm getting confused. Sorry? Who's going to go?
There's 7 points in the implementation plan following.
There's 7. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Johnstone.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We've pretty well talked this one to death, but I wanted to speak through you to staff. Our special events that we have in Maffeo, Sutton, and other areas of the city, are we aware of sponsorships by local water providers for these events? And will it, if we do have sponsors, will it impede the success of the event organizers? I don't know how we can, as a city, enforce banning. Like, there'd be a bylaw and costs as well, and in the facilities themselves, they're revenue generators for us, which help bring down the costs of the user fees. So I'm really mixed on this one.
Your Worship, in regards to the special events, we're actually only looking at mandating our own events, or our own city events, not looking at the special events themselves, such as Dragon Festival or those types of events. Okay. What we would want to be doing is just working with them to, as far as educating the public that are attending the events, and so maybe it's having our own staff out, or joint staff with WaterSmart, to be out there talking about municipal water as part of that promotion of municipal tap water. And as well, it's not our intent, if we're looking at a day like Canada Day, where we're going to, again, try to be the water police for all the different carts and folks that come out on those days and, participate in the events as vendors. However, we would be highly promoting the municipal water as an option. And as far as whether or not they have water companies as a sponsor, I'm not aware directly if they do. However, Councillor McKay and I were speaking prior to the meeting, and for example, the VI Raiders do have a water sponsor at this point in time, and no, our intent is to not be looking at those groups as far as...
Good.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, I guess I just want to say just very quickly, and Councillor Brennan has a point. I find this a difficult one too, because I'm afraid that in this day of age, where most kids have loose change in their pocket, if we do remove bottled water as a choice for them, they'll just drink something else with sugar or some other content in it that I don't think is any more desirable for them to consume than. Anyway, it's a difficult one. Councillor Brennan.
Well, just with regard to that, I think perhaps that's an underestimation of the young people's sophistication when it comes to green alternatives. I think young people are as committed to clean, safe public water as anyone else. I think we've all said this, like, we're not banning the drinking of water in any facility. The RCMP will not be called if you show up with a bottle of water. But what we're doing is saying that we're not going to promote bottled water. And that's just an absolutely logical extension of the second resolution, and that is promoting public ownership of water. I mean, it's just a logical extension of the motion we just unanimously passed. I think that it can be a critical component of our efforts over the next few years to educate the public about the need for the filtration plant, the need for additional water. It just, again, it's a logical extension of other choices we've made. And this is gives us a really good opportunity to educate the public about the, how good Nanaimo water is and how preferable it is to drink your own water and to make sure that we have adequate supply of water. So I think that's a wise thing to do, given that we're prepared to spend $62 million on a filtration plant. And I don't know how many more dollars on another source of water. So for us to do this really seems to me to be just progressing along the educational line of how safe and convenient our water is. And I think kids will understand that. I think the school district has a mandate that's different than City Hall. We're the purveyors of water. We sell water. So it seems to me that it's another logical extension of that.
Maybe to Ms. Zimborski, just a question then. Like what I was envisioning is where someone's using one of our complex that we have within the city, or Parks and Rec, and they go to a vending machine, and if we've removed the bottled water, but they're still having a choice of other drinks, and they approach the machine, what would you envision would happen?
Well, I think what our hope and our plan is that through promotion and education, that people would be taking a left turn or a right turn and going to our water fountain and filling their water bottle with municipal tap water.
Okay, I'll buy that. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was a lot of talk around logical extensions, and I can't see anything really logical than saying that we need to ban bottled water, because there's no health reasons as to why we should ban it. Also, we are spending $65 million on a water treatment facility, but that's something that we can, instead of outright banning something, we can go and say we will promote municipal tap water. We will make it available to people inside the city facilities, and we will hope that, as Councillor McKay said, that they will choose the water fountain instead of buying from the vending machine a bottle of water. For me, I will drink from water fountains that are inside a building than I would outside, and I'm not going to tell the story of why I won't drink from the ones outside, but I don't see what the rationale is here for banning bottled water. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I can see one of the things that comes out of this is, one, we do lose $8,500 every year, and if you multiply that by however many years, that's a significant. It's an amount of money that the city can use to perhaps put in video installation for committee of the whole meetings. I don't know, but I don't like taking away consumer choice. And if, for me, we've lost a lot of freedoms, and government continues to say you can't do this, you can't do that. You're not allowed to smile in passport pictures, and and there's a reason for doing that. But with this, I don't see any reason as to why we would actually do so.
But what was the reason you wouldn't drink from an outside fountain?
Point of order.
Okay, so let's, Councillor Kipp, you're on.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I said a long time ago I didn't want to lose the two other parts to this for the bottled water issue. I did have that one point where someone got a hold of me about the health issue that they like, the distilled water and that. Councillor Anderson put together a great argument about not banning. I think we've done a great job, and staff put forward a great point on the promotion of our tap water, a good shift. I think we've had unbelievable discussions about water over the last months. It's hugely important. I have felt absolutely guilty going to machines and buying orange juice instead of water, because I felt guilty about the water thing. But I've always said I'm concerned with the ban on the bottled water. I don't like the fact that bottled water is so expensive and people are making a pile of money on it. That kind of, it seems like we're promoting water and someone's ripping everybody off for what, 750 mils is worth about 2 liters of gas. You know, and then they buy that water pretty cheap. So this one's a tough one for me, and I have trouble supporting the ban on it. I don't want to become ban NIMO. I think so. I can't support the bottled water ban, but further education and implementation of moving to our water is hugely important. Educating how our water is more important to me.
Well, that's the last question I see on here, and I have to say that I feel much the same way as Councillor Kipp, and possibly Councillor Anderson. I'm not sure what the position was there, but I have a little bit of a problem banning things like that as well, and I think touching on Councillor Brennan's words about the sophistication of youth today, which I totally agree with, I think they're smart enough to make the distinction themselves. So I'm going to have a trouble. Sorry? Question from the floor. So the motion is item 2, if anyone really wishes to read it again. And the question on that, and basically it's to ban bottled water. Is that the correct interpretation?
That's the eventual result, banning the sale of it in our city parks and rec facilities.
Okay. On the motion, all those.
Your Worship. Okay, so I don't want to belabor this either, but it's to transition to, so today, if we approve this motion, we're not banning it tomorrow. We're transitioning out of bottled water. So for us to think that we're banning it, we make it tonight, it happens tomorrow, it doesn't. It's a transition out, correct?
Yes, it's a transition, but it will eventually lead to no more sales of water in city facilities.
That was the point.
Correct, thank you.
Okay, on the motion, all those in favor? We have Councillor Padgett, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Brennan, and Councillor Bestwick opposed. We have Councillor McKay in favor. Sorry?
Let's get this straight here.
In favor would be to
In favor of...
Which eventually means that.
Okay, well, let's just take it the way it's phrased on 2. You're voting yes or no on 2. So you got the recorded votes for yes on 2.
Your Worship, I think I made a mistake on it. So I'd like to call that again. I'd like to.
Okay.
Can you give us the motion, please?
The motion is, let me read the motion, it might make it a little easier. That council directs staff to implement the plan to transition from selling bottled water to promoting and using municipal tax water in the City of Nanaimo parks, recreation, and culture facilities. That is the motion, okay?
All in favor?
Now, all in favor? Again, Councillor Patchy, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Bestwick, Councillor Kipp, and we have Councillor Brennan. And opposed, we have Councillor McKay, Councillor Anderson, Mayor Tan, and Councillor Greaves. The motion passes. You agree? So,
Your Worship, if I might?
Yes.
So, if we've got this clear, this fall, we're banning water sales in public facilities.
I don't know if the timeline was given.
That's what the plan says, Your Worship.
Clarification?
That's correct. This fall, we'd be moving to not selling.
So we're talking 90 days away or so?
I would say probably October.
Yep. I guess that is correct. Okay, we'll move along. Bylaws, that zoning amendment bylaw 2012 number 4500.018 to allow for the display of vehicles for sale within the railway corridor as an accessory use to an adjacent car dealership be adopted.
So
move. Seconder? Second. Moved and seconded.
Received on the corridor foundation.
Sorry?
He's on the corridor foundation. So he feels there's a conflict.
So the records could show that Councillor Greaves absented himself on the perceived conflict of interest as a representative of the Rail Corridor Foundation. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Oh, mercy. And B, the Records Management Bylaw 2012 number 7150 to establish records management procedures for documents and records to the City of Nanaimo be adopted. Moved. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We're going down now to other business, and we're doing the 15A. Councillor Bestwick, read your notice of motion in camera meeting times.
Thank you, Worship. So move that Council direct staff to schedule in-camera council meetings for 9:30 a.m. on regular council meeting days with agenda briefings to follow, and that such meetings be held in the boardroom at City Hall.
Is there a seconder? You're seconding it? Councillor Johnson. Okay. Discussion? Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, I can't support the motion as when we had this discussion earlier a couple months ago and changing it from 11:30, I already made commitments as to that I would be having something that is unchangeable between 10:30 to 11:30. So if council so chooses, we can schedule meetings at 9:30, but I will be leaving at 9:45.
Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I will not be supporting it either because, number one, I've gotten used to the afternoon thing, and I really do like it. It gives me the morning free instead of breaking my Monday into two completely separate entities. On top of that, I have a standing medical appointment that I need to have twice a week, and it's UVB treatment, which I can only get on Mondays and on Wednesdays. And so Monday morning and Wednesday morning, I should say. So for that reason, I also want to stick with the afternoon.
Okay. Councillor Bestwick, did you have anything to add to it?
No, just simply that clearly then we're going to be in a conflict because when we originally changed this, the timing, we changed it to accommodate Councillor Anderson's academic schedule at the university. And that being said, we did that for a reason to be accommodating. And here we are. I think we all have areas that require accommodation. Not all of us are retired and have a 24/7 schedule that is their own to work around. I certainly know that I don't. And so trying to do that for other members of council's schedules and specific schedules, I was hoping to think that we might be able to go back to where we've been for the 7 years or 6 years prior. But that being said, the motion's on the floor, and I'm sure that the balance of council will do what they need to do for their best interests.
Okay, Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I concur with Councillor Bestwick's position on it. A number of months ago, we put a motion forward to accommodate somebody for a short period of time. How we ended up getting this change after that was beyond me, and why we didn't just revert back to where we started from. We did it for a short period for accommodation. Now we ended up with something that's completely different, and I just can't, this takes it back to where we started from, and that's what I'm supporting.
Okay, Councillor Brennan.
I remember that we made the accommodation because Councillor Anderson had classes. I think we then had a period where we set up a period of time, then we would review it. And we came back and reviewed it and made a specific decision that it would be 1 o'clock. I don't have a problem with changing it later, but I too have made a commitment for a 10:30 appointment, Mondays and Wednesdays and Friday if I can. But if in January I could then change my appointments, I could do that. But right now I can't. And as much as I think we should accommodate each other, we made that agreement, and now we're faced with conflicts that we might not have had otherwise. So I would like to support it, but I can't.
Okay, Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Worship. I didn't like to change, but now it's 1 o'clock, I like it, so I'd like to stick with it.
Okay, so, yeah, all right. The motion is the 9:30 meetings for in-camera. All those in favor? Councillor McKay, Councillor Bestwick opposed, balance of council opposed, so the motion fails. And that's the only motion we have. Otherwise, it'll stay the same as we stand. Okay, so we move in. Okay, we move into question period.
Gord Fuller, 604 Nichols Street. With regards to the amenity contributions discussion earlier, I'm just curious as to what, if any, changes to the amenity contributions do the items endorsed by council represent? Because it looks pretty similar to what we've been doing for years.
Mr. Sweetie?
Your Worship, Mr. Fuller is correct. This is actually the first time that we've formalized it through council in a way that we did. So it's really just acknowledging we went through various scenarios with the Development Process Review Committee and discussed it at length, and this was the recommendation to formalize the policy.
Okay.
So in effect, we've chosen to go a route far different than many other communities that would ask far more from developers when doing subdivisions. Looking at past, has staff recommended and council supported any instances in the past that saw an increase to the $1,000 per door contribution, or is it more likely that lower contributions have been primarily accepted?
Mr. Sweetie?
There's certainly been instances, I think of Longwood as an example, where the community contribution was quite large. But typically, lately, it has been the $1,000 a door for the residential.
So not lower than $1,000 a door? I know it's a negotiation process.
Your Worship, I think it's typically been $1,000 per door.
Thank you.
No, sadly, I think we lose out. and the city loses out, the taxpayer loses out.
Councillor McKay.
Can I ask you why, Gord?
Well, many other communities require far more than that for community contributions. You look at Vancouver has a 20%, I believe, that they would require goes towards social housing or the equivalent in cash, which is far more than $1,000 a door.
And they have their own charter too. We're restricted by the community charter, are we not?
I don't believe we are.
We are.
So we're restricted by the community charter, and it says we can only charge $1,000 per door. Well, there you go. Negotiate.
We can accept voluntary contributions.
So we could set the baseline at $10,000 per door. That's for negotiations.
Let's have no construction, possibly. Okay, so someone would like to make the motion? We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.